Chapter 2163. I didn't say that. My master said that. Back then, my master brought me and him to this world so that we could deal with this calamity and the existence of the great sage. Lu Yu said. If it was said by that senior, then it should be true. The Misery Sea holy man nodded his head and did not refute. That existence was far beyond what he could compare to. That existence was even more terrifying and powerful. If he could make a move, then the great sage would not be a problem at all. That existence was rumored to be the creator of the All-Heavens divine realm. The All-Heavens divine realm was his world and he was the creator. However, no one knew whether this was true or not. Nevertheless, it was rumored that he was the creator of the All-Heavens divine realm. Now, he only left behind an avatar to control the All-Heavens divine realm. In other words, it was the Great Tao. The Great Tao of the All-Heavens divine realm was just a strand of his consciousness. I'll go and fetch him. Lu Yu said. You don't have to take the risk, do you? The Misery Sea holy man frowned slightly. Once Lu Yu went out, he might cause a special energy fluctuation. In that case, it would be easier for the great sage's seal to be broken. This was something that the Misery Sea holy man did not want to see. I want to go out. Lu Yu said coldly. I'm not discussing this with you. I'm just informing you. The Misery Sea holy man laughed bitterly. There was no other way. He could not restrict Lu Yu. Although Lu Yu was only in the Tao Lord realm, he was at the end of his life. Furthermore, he had to use all his strength to suppress the great sage. All right, I'll send you out. The Misery Sea holy man nodded his head. After he finished speaking, a passageway appeared in the space. After this passageway appeared, Lu Yu stepped into it. In the next moment, Lu Yu appeared in front of Yang Hongwu. At this moment, Yang Hongwu was frantically refining the demonic insects. When he felt the fluctuation in space, his expression changed as if he was facing a great enemy. In the Illusion Demon Mountain range, there were many dangers. Any fluctuation in space could lead to the appearance of a terrifying enemy. Yang Hongwu did not doubt this at all. If an even more terrifying and powerful enemy appeared, it would be troublesome. Therefore, the moment he felt the fluctuation in space, Yang Hongwu was ready to deal with it. An ancient and majestic seal was released. This seal was the life seal. Yang Hongwu was multitasking. If the fluctuation in space was an enemy, he would not hesitate to give up on dealing with the demonic insects and attack the enemy. However, the moment the enemy appeared, Yang Hongwu was stunned. This was because the enemy was none other than Lu Yu. Although Lu Yu did not cultivate back then, Yang Hongwu was too familiar with Lu Yu. Even though the two of them did not truly merge into one, they were still very familiar with each other. Between the two of them, besides the most intimate thing, they had done everything else. Therefore, when Lu Yu appeared, Yang Hongwu was sure that this was Lu Yu and not someone else. You were... Yang Hongwu looked at the person who came and said. He was very excited. It's me. You're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Lu Yu said. I didn't expect that you would also come to this side of the world. Yang Hongwu took a deep breath and looked at Lu Yu. He was very happy. He had a lot to say, but he didn't know where to start. He didn't know how to say it. Wait a moment. Let me deal with these demonic insects first. After saying that, Yang Hongwu began to concentrate on refining these demonic insects. However, the demonic insects and the huge skeletons seemed to be afraid of Lu Yu's appearance. They did not continue to rush towards Yang Hongwu, which surprised Yang Hongwu. I'll help you. Lu Yu could tell that although these demonic insects were powerful, they were excellent supplements for Yang Hongwu and could help him improve his cultivation. Although others did not know, Lu Yu knew that these demonic insects were transformed from the body of the Tao Master in front of him. This powerful body was a powerful Tao Master called the demonic insect's Tao Master when he was alive. After his death, he turned into countless demonic insects and lived in the illusory demon mountains. It could be said that these demonic insects were the masters of the illusory demon mountains. Of course, the illusory demon abyss was not among them. The illusory demon abyss was even more terrifying. This was because the illusory demon abyss was suppressed by the remains of the great sage. That was the real core of the illusory demon abyss. Help me? Upon hearing this, Yang Hongwu was stunned. He found that Lu Yu's strength was so powerful that he could not see through him. For Yang Hongwu, this was very surprising. Although his cultivation was only in the Dominator realm, he had a powerful eye technique in the Dharma Eye of Devastation. It could be said that as long as the cultivation was not more than 2 realms higher than his, he could see through some clues. However, he could not see through Lu Yu's strength. It could be seen that Lu Yu's cultivation was very powerful and much stronger than his. It should be noted that although Yang Hongwu's cultivation was only in the Dominator realm, with the help of the Dharma Eye of Devastation, it was impossible for him to not see through the strength of a real Dao Master. Because of this, Yang Hongwu knew that Lu Yu was not simple. However, this made Yang Hongwu happy and conflicted. Even now, Lu Yu's cultivation was stronger than his. As a man, it was very shameful that his cultivation was inferior to a woman's. Of course, this was just the result of his male chauvinism. As soon as his voice fell, Lu Yu waved his hand and a ray of light fell on the huge skeleton. The huge skeleton instantly shrank and turned into a ray of pure energy. Then, the pure energy flew toward Yang Hongwu. Yang Hongwu could clearly feel that this pure energy was very powerful. Moreover, most of the demonic nature had been neutralized. Therefore, this energy saved Yang Hongwu a lot of trouble. Of course, it was not something that ordinary people could refine. Although most of the demonic nature had been neutralized, it did not mean that the demonic nature in the energy had been completely neutralized. Without the demonic aura, there was very little of it left. However, ordinary people could not bear it at all. As long as they were contaminated by it, they would fall into the devil's way. This. Yang Hongwu took a deep breath and looked at the ball of energy that was flying towards him. It was so huge that it was enough for a Dao Lord expert to break through the limit and break through to the Dao Master level. It was obvious how terrifying this energy was. Chapter 2164. Yang Hongwu didn't hesitate and threw the huge ball of energy into the devouring furnace to refine it. Lu Yu's voice sounded in his ears. This ball of energy is huge and can improve your cultivation by a lot. However, don't take the risk. This energy contains a terrifying devil will. If you can't refine it and get rid of the devil will, it's better not to use it to improve your cultivation. It's not worth the loss. Don't worry, I know what to do. Yang Hongwu nodded. He knew that it was not easy to completely refine this huge ball of energy and get rid of the devil will in a short time. It could easily cause trouble. Therefore, Yang Hongwu was not in a hurry. He threw the ball of energy into the devouring furnace and refined a part of it. As for the other part, he could directly seal it and release it at a critical moment. It was a very good choice to use it as a trump card. I'll protect you. You can control this energy first. Lu Yu said to Yang Hongwu. She knew that if this energy was not handled well, there would be great hidden dangers. Of course, she also knew Yang Hongwu's potential and believed that he could handle this energy. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken the risk to give this terrifying energy to Yang Hongwu. Miss Lu, who are you? What's your relationship with Yang Hongwu? Why did Yang Hongwu take such a huge risk to meet you after hearing your name? At this moment, Zi Xintong also knew that this woman in front of her was the person Yang Hongwu took such a huge risk to meet. She was very curious. Why was this woman so charming? Why did Yang Hongwu risk his own life to enter the illusory demon abyss? Of course, Zi Xintong was also shocked by Lu Yu's terrifying strength. This woman's strength was simply amazing. She was probably comparable to the experts in the Dao Master realm. Zi Xintong was a very proud woman. She was also very conceited. She thought that she was the strongest woman around Yang Hongwu. Even Hong Qiaoqiao and Jing Qiushuang were far inferior to her. She should be stronger than any of them. Moreover, her talent was also outstanding. Her status was also very high. One must know that she was the princess of the Holy Devil clan and possessed the supreme bloodline of the Holy Devil clan. Just based on this point, almost none of Yang Hongwu's women could be compared to her. However, now, a very strange woman had appeared. It was Lu Yu in front of her. She had never heard of this woman before. Moreover, her strength was so powerful and terrifying. Not to mention the lower realm, even in the entire divine domain, she had never heard of such a woman. Such a powerful woman absolutely couldn't be unknown. When facing Lu Yu, she felt a sense of crisis, but it also stimulated her thoughts of comparison. "I've known him for a long time," Lu Yu said. "We came from the same place." "No, I've never heard of you," Zi Xintong said. "There's no such person like you in the ancient desolate continent." Not the ancient desolate continent, but his previous life. "I came from the same place as him in his previous life." Lu Yu smiled. "Of course you haven't heard of me." Lu Yu couldn't tell Zi Xintong that she and Yang Hanwu both came from Earth. Although Zi Xintong and Yang Hanwu had a close relationship, Zi Xintong might even be Yang Hongwu's woman. Previous life? Zi Xintong and Jing Qiushuang were slightly surprised. For them, it wasn't strange for a cultivator to have a previous life, especially for Zi Xintong. She was a powerhouse in her previous life, a powerhouse of the Saint Devil clan. Now that she had recovered part of her memory, her strength had also recovered a lot. Of course, her memories were just memories. She was still Zi Xintong, controlled by her consciousness and memories of this life. "That's right." Lu Yu nodded. "I wonder if elder sister can tell us about his previous life." Jing Qiushuang's eyes lit up. She was very curious about Yang Hongwu's previous life. Was he a peerless powerhouse in his previous life? Zi Xintong was also curious because they knew that Yang Hongwu should be very powerful in his previous life. Otherwise, Yang Hongwu wouldn't have such a domineering power in his body. It was impossible for some ancient powerhouses to be afraid of him. Therefore, the two girls guessed that Yang Hongwu should be a very powerful powerhouse in his previous life. He was majestic and had supreme prestige. Lu Yu was stunned for a moment, but she immediately reacted. She could see the power in Yang Hongwu's body. Lu Yu's current strength was already at the peak of the Tao Lord realm. Although she hadn't entered the Tao Master realm yet, her strength was already enough to contend with ordinary Tao Masters. Her master's strength was very terrifying. She and Yang Hongwu were both brought to this universe from Earth by her master. Even though her cultivation had reached such a level, it was impossible for her to break through the universe barrier and return to the original world, the original Earth. She couldn't even locate the location of that world and couldn't touch the universe barrier. Therefore, she clearly knew how terrifying and powerful her master's strength was. After all, to cross such a distant void, find that universe, and break through the universe barrier, the amount of energy required was too great. It was unimaginable how powerful he was. It was precisely because of this that she knew how powerful her master was. In fact, her master had told her that the reason he had brought her and Yang Hongwu to this great cosmos was to save this great cosmos. However, she didn't really believe it. Her master's strength was enough to protect this great cosmos. She didn't know what her master's purpose was, but she never doubted her master. "Let's talk about this later." Just as Lu Yu was about to speak, Yang Hongwu had finished sealing the energy. His strength had also improved greatly. Although there was still a long way to go before he reached the Tao Lord realm, his cultivation had also improved a lot. As for the energy, Yang Hongwu had only refined a small part of it. The rest was sealed in the common people's great world by Yang Hongwu. Yang Hongwu didn't dare to release this part of the energy and integrate it into the common people's great world. This was because the common people's great world was the foundation of Yang Hongwu. It was his inner world. If he didn't remove the demon will and integrate it into the common people's great world, then his world might become a demon domain. This wasn't something Yang Hongwu wanted to see. At Bika Library. Chapter 2165. Congratulations, your strength has improved greatly. Zi Xintong was very happy to see Yang Hongwu awake. Although Yang Hongwu's strength hadn't reached the Tao Lord realm, she could clearly feel the terrifying power in Yang Hongwu's body. This power was enough to defeat her. If she didn't use any trump cards, Zi Xintong would have no way of contending with Yang Hongwu. It could even be said that if she faced Yang Hongwu, she wouldn't be able to resist at all. From this, one could see how terrifying Yang Hongwu's strength was. Yang Hongwu also discovered that his battle strength had increased tremendously compared to before. Now, he had only swallowed and refined a small portion of the energy, and he had already obtained such a huge increase. If he were to refine all of it, how much would his battle strength increase? This was absolutely unimaginable. However, Yang Hongwu was very clear that if he continued to devour and refine the energy without any scruples, it wouldn't be a good thing for him. His strength would increase too quickly. In addition, this energy contained a terrifying evil intent. If he was too reckless, it was very likely that he would no longer be himself. He would lose himself and become a puppet of power. He might even turn into a demon. Yang Hongwu had always been very careful, and now it was the same. He didn't dare to be too unbridled. "Come with me. This isn't the place to talk." At this time, Liu saw Yang Hongwu and wanted to ask. She knew very well what Yang Hongwu wanted to ask, but this wasn't the right place. "Okay." Yang Hongwu nodded and said to Zi Xintong and Jing Qiushuang, "Let's go." "Wait, you trust her that much?" Zi Xintong frowned slightly and said, "Aren't you worried that she will scheme against us?" Although Liu said that she and Yang Hongwu came from the same place, that was after all their previous lives. A person's previous life might not be able to dominate. Moreover, Yang Hongwu and Liu had both reincarnated. Although they could remember the things of their previous lives, they might not have the same feelings as their previous lives. Just like Zi Xintong herself, she didn't have the same memories of her previous life. Those memories and those emotions weren't that important to her. "I believe in her," Yang Hongwu said. Yang Hongwu's eyes were very firm. Obviously, he wouldn't change his mind because of Zi Xintong's words. This made Zi Xintong very depressed, but there was nothing she could do. Since Yang Hongwu had already made up his mind, there was absolutely no way she could change it. Since she couldn't change her mind, she couldn't change her mind. Yang Hongwu's words as eyes. Facing Zi Xintong's doubts, Liu smiled slightly. She knew very well, but she didn't say anything. This was human nature. When she first came to this world, she was also very suspicious of her master. Jing Qiushuang didn't doubt Yang Hongwu at all. Although she was worried, she also knew that Yang Hongwu must have his own plans. He wouldn't put himself in danger. She trusted Yang Hongwu very much. She knew that Yang Hongwu was the same as her. He would rather die than let the other party suffer the slightest bit of harm. Therefore, Jing Qiushuang trusted Yang Hongwu. Since Yang Hongwu trusted Liu so much, then Liu shouldn't have any problems. Taking a step back, even if there was something wrong with Liu, Yang Hongwu should have a plan. The three of them came to Liu's side. Liu waved his hand and a transmission channel appeared in front of them. This transmission channel contained ancient and majestic power, but it was also filled with a terrifying murderous intent. This murderous intent made them shudder. Yang Hongwu frowned slightly. This murderous intent made him feel threatened. "Let's go," Liu said. Seeing Liu step into the transmission channel, Yang Hongwu didn't hesitate and followed closely behind. Of course, he held Jing Qiushuang's hand and Jing Qiushuang held Zi Xintong's hand. After stepping into the transmission channel, the four of them appeared in another space. In this space, there was a person sitting cross-legged. This person exuded an ancient power. His aura was majestic, but there was also an aura of decay. This person was the Misery Sea Holy Man. After Yang Hongwu and the other three appeared, the Misery Sea Holy Man's murderous intent became even more intense. "You can't hold on any longer?" After realizing this, Liu frowned slightly. The Misery Sea Holy Man couldn't suppress that person anymore. This surprised Liu. This was beyond her calculations. According to her calculations, the Misery Sea holy man should still be able to hold on. He shouldn't be in such a precarious situation because she brought Yan Hanwu and the other two here. I can't suppress him anymore. The Misery Sea holy man turned around and looked at Lu Yu and the other three. You are Yan Hanwu? The Misery Sea holy man looked at Yan Hanwu. Since Yan Hanwu was the person chosen by that person, he should have something special about him. However, Yan Hanwu's cultivation was still too weak. The Misery Sea holy man couldn't see how Yan Hanwu could suppress the Great Sage. Even if only a part of the Great Sage was sealed here, Yan Hanwu couldn't fight against it. This was because his cultivation and strength were too weak. He was pitifully weak. Even if he could challenge those of a higher level and was a peerless genius, he could only fight against a peak Dao Lord. He couldn't possibly fight against a peak Dao Master. The Misery Sea holy man was a peak Dao Master. If he couldn't suppress this part of the Great Sage, how could Yan Hanwu do it? Senior, who are you? Yan Hanwu looked at the Misery Sea holy man and then at Lu Yu. He hoped that she could give him an explanation. The Misery Sea holy man had killing intent towards them. This wasn't a good thing. Furthermore, he could see that the Misery Sea holy man was very powerful. However, there was a decaying aura on his body. It seemed like his vitality was about to be cut off. A Dao Master with decaying vitality and killing intent wasn't a good thing. Yan Hanwu couldn't help but think of something, which was possession. Was this person trying to possess him? To Yan Hanwu, this wasn't something strange. This was because he had met too many experts who wanted to possess his physical body. If the person in front of him was an ancient expert, it wouldn't be strange if he had such thoughts. This was because it was very normal. Yan Hanwu knew that his physical body and bloodline were very powerful. Even some Dao Masters were attracted to him. Chapter 2166. Wu, this is the Misery Sea holy man. He is the one who suppressed the Great Sage's physical body with the talisman seal. Lu Yu introduced. Don't be rude to your senior. Senior has suppressed the Great Sage here for countless years. Now that he is nearing the end of his life, the Great Sage can no longer be suppressed. You and I need to work together to continue suppressing the Great Sage. The Great Sage's physical body? Yan Hanwu looked at Lu Yu. Yan Hanwu did not doubt Lu Yu's words. However, Yan Hanwu did not believe the Misery Sea holy man in front of him. This guy was nearing the end of his life and his entire body was filled with the aura of death and decay. Such an expert was very scary even when he was about to die. Yan Hanwu did not believe that everyone could face death calmly. Especially for those with higher cultivation, they did not want to die. In order to survive, they would usually do anything. Even if they had to pay a huge price, they would still do it. To them, surviving was the most important thing. Most of these people, when faced with a life or death situation, would throw caution to the wind and fight for a chance to live. The Misery Sea holy man in front of him was obviously at that stage. Although others could not sense the murderous intent in his eyes, it could not escape Yan Hanwu's eyes. Yan Hanwu had cultivated the 10-direction killing fist and had a special cultivation technique. He could clearly sense murderous intent, especially when it was directed at him. Obviously, the Misery Sea holy man was like that. Although his murderous intent towards Yan Hanwu was well concealed and disappeared in a flash, Yan Hanwu could still sense it clearly. That's right. A part of Supreme Sovereign Dao Destroyer's body is sealed here. Senior Misery Sea can no longer suppress it. Supreme Sovereign Dao Destroyer will soon awaken. If we don't suppress him, I'm afraid the entire deity domain will be destroyed. Once Supreme Sovereign Dao Destroyer awakens, not just the deity domain, but the entire deity domain will be plunged into a terrible disaster. Lu Yu nodded and said, in fact, this is also the reason why I only came to find you now. It is also the reason why you and I have to appear here. This is fate. Our fate and mission is to suppress the Great Sage. Lu Yu's words left Yan Hanwu half believing and half doubting. Although Lu Yu was very important to Yan Hanwu was not a fool. He could not completely trust Lu Yu just because of a few words from Lu Yu. After all, he had not seen Lu Yu for so many years. Although Yang Hanwu was confident that Lu Yu's feelings for him would not change, he could not be certain about other things. In fact, Yang Hanwu knew that Lu Yu did not have any ill intentions towards him. She would not plot against him. However, even if Lu Yu did not plot against him, it did not mean that the Misery Sea Holy Man would not plot against him. The Misery Sea Holy Man was not a kind person. Furthermore, Yang Hanwu guessed that the Misery Sea Holy Man did not intend to suppress the great sage here. He was forced to do so. If possible, who would be willing to face such a terrifying existence in such a place? Although he said that he was here to suppress the great sage, in reality, the illusory demon abyss was like a prison. It was impossible for a person to not have any thoughts in such a prison. Right now, he was at the end of his life. However, Yang Hongwu's arrival gave him a chance. It gave him a chance to live. Would he give it up? The only thing that he was wary of was the person behind Lu Yu. That was the person who wanted him to suppress the great sage here. That person's strength was too terrifying, too terrifying. The longer he stayed here, the more he felt how powerful and terrifying that person was. He was someone who could suppress the great sage. What kind of person was the great sage? The Misery Sea Holy Man was very clear about this point. However, to the current him, even if he knew how terrifying that person was, he would not give up such an opportunity. Because, to him, since he was going to die, what else could make him afraid? What else could make him afraid? If he did not succeed, he would die. Since that was the case, why not take a gamble? If he succeeded, he would have profited greatly. In reality, when Lu Yu arrived, the Misery Sea Holy Man had already reached an agreement with the great sage. If not, how could the great sage recover so quickly? This was almost impossible. The Misery Sea Holy Man was not that simple. He was hiding his true strength. Of course, his lifespan was indeed at its end. He was already surrounded by the aura of decay and was on the verge of death. He reached an agreement with the great sage for the sake of this scheme. Lad, your cultivation is too weak. Although you are valued by that person, I don't think you can do it. Lu Yu, are you sure that this lad is the person that he has chosen? You have to be clear that if anything happens to the great sage, there will be no other choice. My lifespan is almost up and I'm about to die. I can't be of much help to you. I might even be controlled by the great sage. When that happens, my physical body might become your enemy. You have to be clear about this. When that happens, it means that you will have to face two Tao masters. The Misery Sea Holy Man looked at Yang Hanwu and turned to Lu Yu. Yang Hanwu narrowed his eyes and activated his Dharma Eye of Annihilation. He had already discovered the Tao Annihilation aura on the Misery Sea Holy Man's body. The great sage had left a unique aura on the Misery Sea Holy Man. This aura did not cause any harm to the Misery Sea Holy Man. Instead, it helped him. The seal formation below seemed to be suppressed by the Misery Sea Holy Man's power. However, this was only on the surface. As long as the great sage willed it, this seal would break immediately. The great sage would break out of the seal. However, the great sage did not do so. This made Yang Hanwu very suspicious. This was only a part of the great sage's physical body. Furthermore, it was a head. The great sage's head. This head contained a terrifying aura and was constantly devouring the power of the entire divine realm. Furthermore, it was not only the divine realm of the lower world that was devouring the power of the upper world. Yang Hanwu was extremely shocked. When he used his Dharma Eye of Annihilation to peek at this head, he felt a terrifying impact. He had been discovered, he had been discovered. After taking a deep breath, Yang Hongwu's expression turned ugly. This was a huge crisis. Lu Yu, listen to me. Leave this place. Yang Hanwu turned his head and said, that person is not someone you and I can deal with. At least, we can't do it now. Be cuckoo. Chapter 2167. Leave? No, We can't leave this place. Master asked me to stay here to suppress the great sage. It's the same for you and me. Lu Yu shook her head and said. Ah Wu, don't you believe me? Looking at Yan Hanwu, Lu Yu's tone was very serious. If Yan Hanwu was unwilling to believe her, Lu Yu would be very sad. Seeing Lu Yu like this, Yan Hanwu felt a headache coming on. At this moment, there were some things that he couldn't say directly. If he said it, the bitter sea holy man might attack him directly. Now, the bitter sea holy man was not on guard. However, he was already in his calculations and could attack at any time. This was an extremely troublesome matter. If the bitter sea holy man allied with the great sage, he, Zi Xintong, Jin Qiushuang and Lu Yu would definitely not be a match for the bitter sea holy man. Lu Yu, listen to me. Things aren't as simple as you think. The bitter sea holy man isn't one of us. Supreme Sovereign Tao Destroyer has already broken the seal, but he hasn't done anything yet. I'm afraid he's plotting against us. The bitter sea holy man has already reached an agreement with Supreme Sovereign Tao Destroyer. Yan Hanwu said telepathically. Impossible. Lu Yu was shocked when she heard this. She said to Yan Hanwu, Senior Bitter Sea, how can that be? He has suppressed the great sage for countless years and has done great deeds. How can he reach an agreement with the great sage? This is impossible. I don't believe it. Yan Hanwu laughed bitterly. However, he understood Lu Yu very well. If it was him, he wouldn't believe it so easily either. After all, the bitter sea holy man had indeed guarded this place for countless years. His deeds were indelible. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he had done great deeds. I don't deny that. However, some things are not as simple as what we see. Some things can't be seen on the surface. Although I don't admit that the bitter sea holy man has done a lot of good deeds, is he really willing to do that? Is he really willing to stay here and protect the Tao Destroyer Supreme Sovereign? I don't think so. Furthermore, he is nearing the end of his life. His will is no longer as strong as before. Furthermore, there is the influence of the great sage who is about to break out of the seal. Therefore, it's still unknown whether the bitter sea holy man is still the same as before. Yang Hanwu explained. He wanted to persuade Lu Yu in the shortest time possible. Although he could leave immediately, he couldn't let Lu Yu be in danger. After all, Lu Yu was his woman and equally important to him. Also, Lu Yu was related to the secret of how he entered this world. What kind of person was her master? From Lu Yu's words, Yan Hanwu vaguely understood that the reason why he and Lu Yu entered this universe was because of her master. You also said that the bitter sea holy man's life is nearing its end. Why would he still cooperate with the great sage? I don't believe that the great sage can give him any benefits. Don't tell me you can give him enough lifespan to break through? Lu Yu frowned slightly and said. She didn't doubt Yan Hanwu because she knew very well what kind of person Yan Hanwu was. Furthermore, even if Yan Hanwu had many women now, she didn't believe that Yan Hanwu would harm her or lie to her. If Yan Hanwu no longer had feelings for her, then Yan Hanwu wouldn't take such a huge risk to enter the illusory demon abyss after hearing about her. The illusory demon abyss was the most terrifying place in the entire divine realm. Even Tao lords, half-step Tao masters, and even Tao masters would find it difficult to leave this place. Countless experts had died here. Yang Hongwu's current cultivation was only at the sovereign realm. No matter how talented and outstanding he was, he couldn't be more powerful than a Tao master. Moreover, even if he had a way to avoid some risks, there was no need for him to risk his life to meet someone he no longer had feelings for. Therefore, Lu Yu knew very well that Yang Hongwu's feelings for her were still the same as before. Just like herself, her feelings for Yan Hanwu had not changed from the beginning to the end. Of course, Lu Yu was very angry about the fact that Yang Hanwu already had many women. However, she also knew that Yang Hanwu had a special physique. If he wanted to live, he had to find women with a purine physique. Moreover, the cultivation method he cultivated was also very special. Therefore, he was destined to have more than one woman. Even if Lu Yu was unhappy about this, she couldn't change it unless she was willing to see Yang Hanwu die. Of course, this was impossible. She would never allow Yang Hanwu to die. Perhaps it is? You should know what level Tao Destroyer Supreme Master is at. At that level, as long as you have enough strength, you can be immortal. If Misery Sea Holy Man wants to continue living or enter a higher realm, the only one who can help him is Tao Destroyer Supreme Master. There's nothing strange about this. Yang Hanwu continued to explain when he saw that Lu Yu was starting to believe him and started to waver. Perhaps what you said is true, but I still can't leave. After a pause, Lu Yu's eyes were resolute. She transmitted her voice to Yang Hanwu and said, "Take them and leave first. I want to see if this is really the case. If Senior Misery Sea really betrayed us like you said, then I will deal with him." "No." Yang Hanwu stopped her. "You're no match for them. The Misery Sea Holy Man is extremely powerful, and the Great Sage is even more terrifying. His power far exceeds that of the Misery Sea Holy Man. Even if it's just a head, it's still very frightening." Yang Hanwu knew very well that at the Great Sage's level, he was probably immortal. Almost no one could kill him. If he could really be killed, then the experts who defeated the Great Sage would not have just separated the Great Sage's body and suppressed it. Instead, they would have killed him and destroyed him completely. Since they did not kill him and only suppressed him, it was enough to prove that the Great Sage was immortal. In other words, only special people could kill him. However, the people who could kill him had to be extremely powerful. It was probably impossible for a Tao Master to do so. Perhaps even a great Tao Master would not be able to do so. They might have to surpass that level. If it was really as he thought, Lu Yu would definitely die if she stayed behind alone. Chapter 2168. You go first. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm strong enough to fight against the Misery Sea Holy Man. Moreover, I still have the life-saving trump card that my master left for me. Lu Yu said. Go, where do you think you're going? At this point, the Misery Sea Holy Man said coldly. He actually heard the conversation between the two. At this point, the entire illusory demon abyss was sealed. The Misery Sea Holy Man stood up and looked at Yang Hanwu. He said coldly, Kid, your physical body belongs to me. Senior Misery Sea, you betrayed us? At this point, Lu Yu finally understood that what Yang Hanwu said was true. The Misery Sea Holy Man had really betrayed them. He had probably teamed up with the Great Sage and submitted to the Great Sage. Initially, I didn't want to kill you. However, now that you know, you're dead for sure. The Misery Sea Holy Man looked at Lu Yu. Lu Yu was very strong. Furthermore, he definitely had the protection of that person. Therefore, it would not be easy to kill Lu Yu. However, if he allowed Lu Yu to leave safely, the fact that he had teamed up with the Great Sage would be exposed. However, if he wanted to kill Lu Yu, the other party would also sense it. This was because Lu Yu was his disciple. If something happened to Lu Yu, the other party would definitely come here to investigate. In this way, he would still be exposed. This was something that gave him a huge headache. He could not kill Lu Yu, nor could he not kill Lu Yu. Therefore, he could only seal Lu Yu here. Senior Misery Sea, is this worth it? You will not have a good ending for submitting to the Great Sage. Do you know that? Although Lu Yu knew that the Misery Sea Holy Man had betrayed them, she was still very calm. The Misery Sea Holy Man was very strong. However, he was on the brink of death. His lifespan was almost up and he could not unleash his peak strength. Therefore, she was not afraid of the Misery Sea Holy Man. However, she was worried about the Great Sage. If the Great Sage was in a sealed state, it wouldn't be difficult for her to seal the head of the Great Sage. But now, she couldn't do it. If the Great Sage had broken the seal, she wouldn't be able to deal with the Great Sage even if she was several times stronger. Shut up. Upon hearing Lu Yu's words, the Misery Sea Holy Man was infuriated. He said coldly, Lu Yu, who do you think you are? If you did not have a good master, you would be nothing. You are probably not even in the sovereign realm now. You are just lucky. Furthermore, your master, that old thing, what right does he have? Why should I suppress the great sage here? Did he ask me for my opinion? Suppressing him here will exhaust my cultivation and my lifespan. I won't even have the chance to improve. My cultivation and my lifespan are constantly being depleted. After so many years, my lifespan is about to be depleted. What have I gained? As he thought of this, the misery sea holy man was furious. He was dissatisfied and filled with hatred. After all, he was a Tao master. Yet, he had to suppress the head of the great sage here. This was something he was unwilling to do. Luyu took a deep breath. She was very clear about this. In fact, if she was in his position, it was impossible for her to not feel resentful. Master knows about your situation. As long as we seal Grand Monarch Tao Exterminator, Master will definitely compensate you. Luyu looked at the misery sea holy man and said. She wanted to persuade the misery sea holy man. After all, without the misery sea holy man, she would not be able to complete her task. She would not be able to seal the great sage. She might even be killed instead. She and Yang Hanwu might die here. If the misery sea holy man did not betray her, then she could join forces with Yang Hanwu to continue sealing the great sage. However, if the misery sea holy man betrayed her, then the possibility of her defeating the misery sea holy man and sealing the great sage was too low. After all, Yang Hanwu's cultivation was too weak. After all, he was only in the sovereign realm. If Yang Hanwu's cultivation was at the Tao master level, then dealing with the misery sea holy man and the great sage's head would not be a difficult task. Haha, Luyu, you don't have to say anymore. If that old thing really thought of this, why hasn't he appeared after so many years? Furthermore, he hasn't appeared until now. Why did he send a little girl like you? He doesn't care about me at all. Furthermore, I'm afraid that the celestial realm is nothing in his eyes. In his eyes, we, and even the great sage, are just his toys. We are just his pastimes. The misery sea holy man was furious. The great sage had told him many things. He had suppressed the great sage for so many years. How could he not communicate with the great sage? 1,000 years ago, he was still as firm as a rock and would not be affected by the great sage. However, as time passed, he was no longer the misery sea holy man of the past. He did not want to die. He wanted to reach a higher level. What he wanted could not be given to him by others. However, the great sage could give it to him. It was because of this that he reached an agreement with the great sage. The great sage gave him the opportunity to break through. He gave him a chance to break through from the Tao master level to the great Tao master level. Now, the opportunity had come. As for the great sage, he could have broken the seal a long time ago. He could have charged out of the illusory demon abyss and regained his freedom. However, he did not do so. His strength had not recovered. Once he left this place, he would be suppressed by Luyu's master, Furukura Daizuan. He was looking for an opportunity to recover his strength. What he wanted to do was to wait for an opportunity to find his physical body and regain his peak strength. Now was the time for an opportunity. The ancient Desolation Supreme Venerate wasn't in the celestial realm. His true body was trapped in another great cosmos. Therefore, the great sage knew that his opportunity had come. The great Tao of this universe had been scattered by him and had yet to recover. Therefore, once his physical body was reassembled, the great Tao of this universe would not be able to restrict him. As for the misery sea holy man, this was also an opportunity for him. With his help, the great sage could speed up his recovery. He needed an assistant to help him find his physical body quickly. His physical body was sealed in the celestial realm. It was divided into 13 pieces and sealed in the 13 celestial realms. He could not act without restraint. Therefore, he needed the misery sea holy man to help him complete it. He gave the misery sea holy man the opportunity to break through and become a great Tao master. Chapter 2169. Shut up, Misery see holy man, shut up. Master is not that kind of person. Lu Yu was infuriated when she heard that Misery see holy man had insulted her master. In Lu Yu's heart, her master, ancient desolation supreme sovereign, was the most respectable person. His strength was also incomparably powerful. How could Lu Yu not be infuriated when Misery see holy man insulted her master in such a manner? Angry? Angry? Misery see holy man said coldly, "You don't know how shameless that old thing is?" Back then, he could have sealed the great sage outside the celestial realm and the boundless void. However, he did not do so. Do you know why? Misery see holy man was furious when he thought of this. He was filled with resentment towards Farukara Daizuan. He did not want to expend his own powers. He did not want to expend a portion of his powers because sealing the great sage in the boundless void would deplete his powers. In that case, he would no longer be able to dominate and control the celestial realm. Furthermore, his cultivation would not be able to improve further because he had to suppress the great sage. Misery see holy man said, "He is an extremely selfish person. I'm afraid that he has his own plans for nurturing you." Misery see holy man was not a fool. He could tell that Farukara Daizuan valued Lu Yu so much because Lu Yu had something special about her. However, Misery see holy man's powers were limited and he could not tell what was so special about Lu Yu. Although her body constitution was strong, it was not the best. Of course, Yang Hanwu was the same. Yang Hanwu had a pure yang body constitution while Lu Yu had a pure yin body constitution. If the two of them were to cultivate together, it would not be as simple as 1 + 1. However, they would only be able to cultivate faster than the average person. In reality, it was not that fast. Don't be angry. When Yang Hanwu saw Lu Yu like this, he hurriedly said, "If you are angered by him, you will fall into his trap." The bitter sea holy man wanted to pit himself, Lu Yu and the rest against him. This was the bitter sea holy man's territory and he definitely had the upper hand. The great sage was an even scarier and more terrifying existence. This was the true great demon king. Once the great sage made his move, all of them would probably die here. Lu Yu calmed down when he heard Yang Hongwu's words. She was an intelligent woman. If she had not been angered and influenced by the Misery sea holy man, she would not have been so angry. That's right. I didn't expect you to be able to get rid of your anger so quickly. But so what? The Misery sea holy man said coldly, "Now, the illusory demon abyss has been completely sealed by me. You can't leave. Surrender. If you surrender, you will still have a chance to live." The Misery sea holy man knew that Lu Yu definitely had a trump card. It was a trump card left behind by Farukara Daizuan. It was definitely a terrifying trump card left behind to deal with the great sage. If it was not a critical moment, Lu Yu would definitely not use it. And the Misery sea holy man wanted to force out this trump card. Because once this trump card was forced out, the great sage would not have any restrictions or scruples. However, that would be extremely dangerous for him. It could even endanger his life. However, he had received the great sage's promise that nothing would happen to him. That was why he was so fearless. Do you really think that I don't have a trump card? Misery sea holy man, do you think that master didn't plot against you when you betrayed him and fell into the satanic way? Lu Yu said coldly. You underestimate master. With that, Lu Yu took out an item. It was a talisman. This talisman was Farukara Daizuan's original spirit avatar. This avatar contained a portion of Farukara Daizuan's power. If it was unleashed, it would definitely be invincible in this world. The Misery sea holy man's expression changed when he saw this talisman. Original spirit avatar. That old thing actually left behind an original spirit avatar? Although the Misery sea holy man knew that Farukara Daizuan would definitely leave behind a powerful trump card, he never expected that Farukara Daizuan would leave behind an original spirit avatar. Furthermore, it was an extremely powerful one. The power that this avatar contained was extremely terrifying. It was probably equivalent to 70% of Farukara Daizuan's power or even more. Since you recognize Master's original spirit avatar talisman, you still dare to be so presumptuous? Lu Yu squinted his eyes and said, "It's not too late to regret now." Regret? Impossible. I won't regret it. So what if it's that old thing's original spirit avatar talisman? The Misery Sea holy man said coldly, "Do you really think that he's invincible? If his original body was here, I might be a little wary. However, it's just an avatar. I'm not afraid at all. Since you're so stubborn, I can only kill you." Lu Yu took a deep breath and crushed the talisman. At this moment, a terrifying power appeared in the void. This power was majestic, powerful, and imposing. Following that, a figure appeared. This figure was Farukra Daizuan. "Misery Sea, you still betrayed us." This person looked at the Misery Sea holy man and took a deep breath. His tone was filled with pity. "Ancient Baron, you old thing. You don't have to be so pretentious." The Misery Sea holy man looked at the avatar of Farukra Daizuan and squinted his eyes. He was still very fearful. After all, this was Farukra Daizuan. He was very powerful and could be said to be the most powerful existence in the celestial realm. Back then, no one was his match. Even the great sage could only contend with him. In reality, based on true strength, the great sage might not have been a match for Farukra Daizuan even at his peak. If not for this, the great sage would not have been suppressed. Even if Farukra Daizuan used a scheme back then, one had to admit that Farukra Daizuan was stronger than the great sage. Even if Farukra Daizuan did not use a scheme and fought the great sage one-on-one, Farukra Daizuan would not have been at a disadvantage. However, if that was the case, Farukra Daizuan would have been able to win, but he would have been severely injured and would have fallen into a deep sleep. Unlike now, where there was only a small wound on his body. "Come out, brother Mia." Farukra Daizuan looked into the depths of the darkness and said, "Ancient Baron, you're still so careful and afraid of death. You don't dare to fight me head-on." Suddenly, a voice echoed out from the depths of the darkness. It was none other than Grand Monarch Tao Destroyer's voice. It wasn't as sinister and evil as Yang Hongwu had imagined. Instead, it was as bright and open as a spring breeze. Chapter 2170. Tao Destroyer, you're still the same. You want to destroy my world? That's impossible. I won't allow you to do that. Although the existence of this universe is no longer a threat to me, it doesn't matter if you destroy this universe. This is my universe after all, Farukra Daizuan said. Yang Hongwu and the others had mixed feelings when they heard Farukra Daizuan's words. They didn't expect that this universe, which was dispensable in Farukra Daizuan's eyes, was related to their life and death. If this universe was destroyed, they would all die without a doubt. Yang Hongwu didn't think that he was strong enough to escape when this universe was destroyed. Since the destruction of this universe has no effect on you, why do you have to target me? The great sage looked at Farukra Daizuan and said, "Why don't you let me go? You're under a lot of pressure in the endless void battlefield, aren't you? If you have my help, you'll be under a lot less pressure." "That's impossible." Farukra Daizuan shook his head and said, "Don't think that I don't know what kind of relationship you have with those demons. I have nothing to do with them." The great sage narrowed his eyes and continued, "I can sign a contract with you. With your strength, are you afraid that I'll tear up the contract? I'll never ask a tiger for its skin. Give up. No matter what you say, I won't agree to it." Farukra Daizuan shook his head and said. At this moment, the great sage saw that Farukra Daizuan was about to make a move and said, "What if I agree to give you that thing?" Just when the great sage was about to make a move, he suddenly stopped and looked at the great sage with flickering eyes. It was obvious that he was very tempted. At this moment, Lu Yu was very anxious. The great sage continued, "That item is very important to you, isn't it? With that thing, you can get something you want, and if I don't give it to you, you'll never be able to accomplish what you want," he said. "The one thing that I want to accomplish." Farukra Daizuan took a deep breath. His expression was complicated. He looked at the great sage and said, "Okay, I agree. If you give me that thing, I'll let you go. The great sage paused for a moment before pointing at Yan Hanwu and saying, of course, but there's also this brat. That won't do. Furukara Daizuan shook his head. The great sage said, you'd better think this through clearly. This brat only has a slightly better aptitude. To you, he's not that important. Yang Hanwu was very angry when he heard these two talking about him as if he was something in their hands, a commodity that could be traded. Lu Yu was very anxious. Although Lu Yu didn't know what they were talking about, one could imagine how important that thing was to her master, Furukara Daizuan. Otherwise, Furukara Daizuan wouldn't have agreed to the great sage's conditions. If Yang Hanwu were to be taken away as well, Yang Hanwu would most likely die. There would be no good ending for him. Yang Hanwu was very important to Lu Yu. She couldn't just watch as Yang Hanwu was taken away. Master, you can't trust him. He's a demon. You can't trust his words. You can't let him take Yang Hanwu away, Lu Yu said loudly. Little girl, this matter isn't something you can control. I'm already being very kind to you by not taking you down. The great sage said, Gu Huang, think carefully. You're just giving up on this brat. There's no loss for you. On the contrary, you'll get something that will be of great help to what you want to do. In fact, you're the one who's profiting. Furukara Daizuan looked at Yan Hanwu and then at Lu Yu. In the end, he sighed and said, all right, I promise you. With that, he waved his hand and prepared to leave with Lu Yu. However, how could Lu Yu agree to leave just like that? Master, I misjudged you, Lu Yu said angrily. I won't leave. I want to be with Yan Hanwu. With that, Lu Yu stood firmly beside Yan Hanwu. At this time, Yan Hanwu smiled. He could see that he had been schemed against. If it wasn't for his special cultivation method, he wouldn't have been able to see through all this. The great sage is indeed worthy of being called a legendary expert. Your strength is terrifying. Yang Hanwu looked at the great sage and said, even if you're sealed, you're still so strong. Truly amazing. How did you see through it? The great sage was surprised. At this time, Lu Yu, Zi Xintong, Jin Qiushuang, and the others were very surprised by the strange conversation between Yang Hanwu and the great sage. They didn't understand what was going on. My strength is special. It's just a little bit. Yang Hanwu said, I was still doubtful at first, but now I'm sure. Good boy, as expected of his inheritance. The great sage took a deep breath and immediately understood. What's going on? Lu Yu asked at this time. Lu Yu wasn't a fool. She understood something, but she wasn't very clear about it. Look at your trump card. Yan Hanwu said. How is this possible? At this time, Lu Yu's eyes widened. She realized that her real spirit incarnation talisman hadn't been used. It was her master Furukara Daizuan's real spirit incarnation talisman. It was still intact and hadn't been used. Then, who was the ancient desolation great sovereign that had just appeared? Delusion, how is this possible? At this time, the entire environment changed. At this time, Yang Hanwu's group and Lu Yu were in an ancient and barren hall. This hall was filled with a violent and ferocious aura. This is all an illusion. How is this possible? Illusion, if this is an illusion, then where's the miseries see holy man? Lu Yu took a deep breath. She was shocked. When she entered the illusion demon mountain range, she had already fallen into an illusion. How terrifying was this? Reality and illusion alternated. She couldn't differentiate between reality and illusion. This was too terrifying. The miseries see holy man from before was also an illusion. How terrifying was this power? If the great sage wanted to attack her, wouldn't she be unable to fight back? She was now thinking, Yan Hanwu. Could the Yan Hanwu in front of her be an illusion as well? Could it be that the great sage had transformed into him? If that was really the case, then he could even know the memories in his heart. That was too terrifying, too terrifying. Yang Hanwu saw through Lu Yu's thoughts. He shook his head and said, I'm real. Zi Shintong and Qiu Shuang are also real. If you want to talk about the 9 Heavens Divine Dragon technique with more like-minded people, you can follow me on WeChat. Talk about life, find friends. Chapter 2171. This is too frightening. I never thought that I would fall into his trap. As expected of a great Tao supremacy. Lu Yu looked at the great sage and couldn't help but comment. In fact, although the illusion was terrifying, it allowed Lu Yu to heave a sigh of relief. If what she had seen and heard before was true, then she really had no way to stop it. Fortunately, it was fake. Only then would they have a chance of survival. She also didn't believe that her master Farokura Daizuan would give up on her and Yan Hongwu. Little fellow, I still underestimated you. Supreme Sovereign Tao Destroyer looked at Yan Hongwu and said, I can't believe that a mere sovereign realm martial artist can resist my illusion. I have to admit that you're really good. You've impressed me, but so what? Your cultivation is still too weak. The Misery Sea holy man should have really betrayed us, right? Yan Hongwu looked at the great sage. At this moment, although the great sage hadn't really broken the seal, he wasn't far off. At this moment, Yan Hongwu didn't see the Misery Sea holy man. He believed that the Misery Sea holy man had really betrayed him. Hearing Yan Hongwu's words, the great sage was once again surprised. You think he's still alive? He's still alive. Yan Hongwu said, in order to keep me here, you actually wanted to help him take over my physical body, right? If you didn't reach an agreement with him, you shouldn't have broken the seal so quickly. Not bad, I like you more and more. Little fellow, how about you pledge your allegiance to me? I can take you in as my disciple. The great sage looked at Yan Hongwu and narrowed his eyes. In this world, my strength is top-notch. Even in ancient times, Huang was inferior. That old thing Huang's strength is inferior to mine as well. If it wasn't for him scheming against me back then, who would have won and who would have lost is still unknown. A loss is a loss. Yan Hongwu shook his head and said, no matter what the reason is, it's just an excuse. As long as you win, it's strength. Hearing Yan Hongwu's words, the great sage froze for a moment before laughing loudly. That's right, a loss is a loss. There's no need to find excuses. Strategy is also a part of strength. The great sage paused for a moment before continuing, however, it's true that I lost last time, but this time, I will definitely win. The great sage was extremely confident. His terrifying aura burst forth as if the entire world was cheering for him. One had to know that this was the fantasy fiend abyss, the place where Farokura Daizuan sealed the great sage. Here, there was the seal of the Farokura Daizuan. If not for the power of the Farokura Daizuan seal, the great sage would have escaped long ago. Impossible, you must be dreaming. Master has long planned this. Even if Misery Sea holy man betrayed you, you can't break out of the seal. Young lady, you think too highly of your master, Lu Yu said coldly. I'm here to complete the mission my master gave me and seal you again. Supreme Sovereign Tao Destroyer chuckled and said, you underestimate me too much. If his true body came here, perhaps I would be a little wary. However, you guys are so weak that I can't even deal with you. I'm interested in fighting. A great Tao supremacy did indeed have the strength to say such words when facing a few martial artists who hadn't even reached the Tao supremacy level. After all, he was powerful enough. Even if he hadn't recovered yet and hadn't completely broken out of the seal. If you're really that capable, you wouldn't be talking so much nonsense here. If I'm not wrong, you're just stalling for time, right? Yan Hongwu looked at the great sage and said with a faint smile. Of course, he could tell that although the great sage was powerful enough, his strength was far from his peak due to the restrictions of the seal. The reason why Misery Sea Holy Man hadn't appeared yet was because Misery Sea Holy Man was still trying to break out of the seal. This was because the Misery Sea Holy Master was still trying to break the seal on Supreme Venerate Tao Destroyer's head. After all, it would take time for Supreme Venerate Tao Destroyer's head to be completely unsealed. If Liu released Farukra Daizuan's talisman at this time, the seal would be strengthened and the Great Sage would be sealed once again. If the Great Sage wanted to break out of the seal, it would cost more and more. The price he had to pay for the seal would be even greater, and it would take even more time. This was something he did not want to see. After all, this was the best opportunity because Farukra Daizuan's original body was no longer in this great cosmos. He had already gone to the endless void battlefield. If he waited until he returned from the endless void battlefield, it would be too difficult for the Great Sage to break out of the seal. Damn it. At this moment, Liu had regained his senses and understood the Great Sage's plan. He was trying to stall for time. It could be said that the Great Sage knew that Liu Yu's existence was a huge threat to him, but he didn't do anything. Instead, he set up an illusion from the start and trapped Liu Yu in it. In fact, he was trying to stall for time so that he would have enough time to break out of the seal left behind by Farukra Daizuan. Seal. However, it was already too late for Liu Yu to regain his senses. The seal left behind by Farukra Daizuan was in imminent danger. The Great Sage, it's impossible for you to break out of the seal. I won't let you do as you wish. The enraged Liu really took out the true spirit incarnation talisman left behind by Farukra Daizuan this time. Ha, it's too late, little girl. It's already too late. A mere true spirit incarnation is no match for me. If it had been before, the ancient desolation's incarnation could have continued to seal me. However, it's no longer possible now. The seal has been torn apart by me. The Great Sage laughed heartily. He didn't fear anyone now, unless Farukra Daizuan's original body descended. However, that was impossible. He had already planned everything out. That great battle in the depths of the endless void had also been part of his plan. For the sake of this moment, he had waited for countless years, endured for countless years, so how could he possibly fail? At this moment, Liu had already crushed the true spirit incarnation talisman and Farukra Daizuan's incarnation appeared. Although the Farukra Daizuan in front of him was only an incarnation, the aura it exuded was extremely terrifying. At the same time, the Great Sage's aura was also rising steadily. Compared to Farukra Daizuan's incarnation, it was even more terrifying. It was even more powerful and terrifying. The confrontation between the two powerful auras shook the entire space of the illusory demon abyss as if it was about to collapse. Chapter 2172. It's not enough. Don't waste your energy. Ancient Desolation, you're only an avatar. You can't continue to suppress me. The corners of Grand Monarch Daodestroyer's mouth curled into a smile as his aura grew more and more terrifying. This overbearing aura suffocated all living beings below the Tao Lord realm and the illusory fiend abyss. Those who were too close simply couldn't withstand this terrifying pressure and were directly crushed to death by this overbearing aura. Damn it. If this continues, the situation won't be good. At this moment, Liu was also very nervous. She could see that the Great Sage's momentum had really been established. She regretted it now. If she had done it earlier, this wouldn't have happened. However, it was too late for regrets now. She could only hope that her master's clone would be able to suppress Supreme Sovereign Tao Destroyer. Even if he couldn't, he would at least severely injure him. Only then would they have a chance to suppress Supreme Sovereign Tao Destroyer and buy some time until Supreme Sovereign Ancient Desolation's true body returned. If they couldn't do it, the Divine Realm would be lost. Not only that, they wouldn't be able to survive either. Don't worry, we're not at the end of the line yet. The Great Sage may be strong, but it won't be that easy for him to defeat Farukra Daizuan's avatar. Yang Hanwu saw that Liu Yu was about to make a move and couldn't help but move slightly. He gently pressed down on Liu Yu's shoulder and said, "But..." Liu Yu was still very worried. She could see that her master's avatar really couldn't be suppressed. If she didn't make a move now, there wouldn't be a chance. No need. Yang Hanwu shook his head and said, "Your master is stalling for time for us." Who was Farukra Daizuan? He was a peerless powerhouse. It could be said that he was the strongest existence in this great cosmos. How could he not see through Yang Hongwu's scheme? Although Yang Hongwu seemed to be here, he had already begun to make arrangements in the dark. They were formations and restrictions. Yang Hongwu had used the I Chi into 3 pure ones to create a powerful formation in the dark. At the same time, he was trying to repair the original sealing formation. Once the Great Sage was injured, Yang Hongwu could use the power of the formation to suppress the Great Sage and seal him again. It was precisely because Furukura Daizuan had seen through Yang Hongwu that he was trying to create an opportunity for Yang Hongwu to stall for time. Of course, he would also think of a way to injure the Great Sage. In reality, he had already planned this out. If he knew, Grand Monarch Dao Destroyer would definitely break out of his seal. If he had come in person and was willing to pay a certain price, he would have been able to kill the Great Sage. Even if the Great Sage could reincarnate and cultivate again, it would take countless years for him to recover and return to his peak. However, Furukura Daizuan didn't do that because it wasn't worth it to him. Furukura Daizuan didn't have enough time or energy to deal with the Great Sage. The true pressure he needed to face came from the depths of the endless void. It was the battlefield of the endless void. That was the true pressure he had to face. In fact, Supreme Venerate Dao Destroyer had been like him in the beginning. They had both been geniuses born in this universe and had grown to become unparalleled experts in order to resist the invasion of the outer realms in the endless void. However, due to various reasons, the Great Sage had ultimately fallen to the evil path and become enemies with Furukura Daizuan. Originally, they had been good friends, but now, they had become enemies. They had become sworn enemies. It was also because of this that Furukura Daizuan had no choice but to seal the Great Sage. Because of the Great Sage, this great cosmos had suffered severe internal friction and suffered a great loss of strength. This had also caused this great cosmos to be at a great disadvantage. Its status among the countless great cosmoses was getting lower and lower. Furthermore, it was already in imminent danger. In the depths of the endless void, there were many powerful great cosmoses that wanted to annex this great cosmos. This was also why Furukura Daizuan had only sent one of his clones to suppress the Great Sage. In fact, Yang Hongwu and Luyu had been brought to this great cosmos from an ancient primeval universe. Just like him, Yang Hongwu and Luyu had limitless potential. In particular, Yang Hongwu had the potential to become a universe overlord. What was a universe overlord? They were the masters of the highest planes of the universe in the boundless starfields and the endless void. In fact, Furukura Daizuan also had such potential. However, he hadn't been able to become the true ruler of this great cosmos. If the Great Sage hadn't schemed against him back then and damaged the great Tao of this great cosmos, he would have become a universe overlord by now. However, the great Tao of this great cosmos was damaged and incomplete, which had led to the current situation. If he had become a universe overlord back then, this great cosmos wouldn't have been in such an awkward situation now. It wouldn't have become the target of the powerful universe overlords in the endless void and the endless star fields. As for all this, Yang Hongwu didn't know. His current strength was far from enough. He was only at the Dominator realm and wasn't even a Tao Lord. He didn't know when he would become a Tao Master, let alone a great Tao Master and a universe overlord. What Yang Hongwu needed to do now was to set up the array to suppress and seal the Great Sage. This was the most important thing for him to do now. During the battle between the Great Sage and Furukura Daizuan's clones, the entire space in the illusory demon abyss was destroyed and repaired again and again. This space was very special. The space was destroyed by the power of the battle between the two, but it was repaired by the power of the universe space. However, the energy that erupted during this process was quite terrifying. Yang Hongwu, Zi Xintong, Luyu, and the others were like small boats in a storm under the impact of this domineering energy. They kept swaying and seemed to be in danger of being destroyed at any time. At this time, Zi Xintong and Jin Qiushuang realized how weak their strength was. Even though they had reached the Tao Lord realm, they were still far from a true master. Yang Hongwu was the same. He lamented how weak he was. Even a clone of a great Tao Master was so terrifying. What kind of existence would a great Tao Master be when he was at his peak? At that level, a single glance would be enough to kill him. It was really terrifying. In the face of such a powerful force, he was really too weak and helpless. This reminded Yan Hanwu of a saying, weak, pitiful, and helpless. Chapter 2173. Damn it, you're a lunatic. At this moment, the great sage was looking at Farukra Daizuan's incarnation. It was so crazy that even the great sage was afraid of it. Although Farukra Daizuan's incarnation was not a match for the great sage, but it was Farukra Daizuan's incarnation that was fighting with his life on the line, which made the great sage feel helpless. In this way, although he could defeat Farukra Daizuan's incarnation in a short time, he would suffer great injuries. It was not worth it for him. He could obviously use his advantage and strength to kill Farukra Daizuan's incarnation without paying too much of a price. However, if Farukra Daizuan attacked so crazily, he could still kill it, but it would take a lot of effort. It was not worth it. However, he had no other choice because Farukra Daizuan was fighting with his life on the line. What should we do? If this goes on, your master's incarnation will be killed sooner or later. At that time, we won't be able to compete with the great sage. Zi Xindong's expression was very solemn, and so was Xin Qiushuang, who was beside Yan Hanwu. Husband, do you have a way? Xin Qiushuang looked at Yan Hanwu and said. In her mind, Yan Hanwu had always been able to devise strategies. Basically, nothing could stop him. She believed that Yan Hanwu would be able to deal with Grand Monarch Dao Exterminator this time. Don't worry. Senior is creating an opportunity for us to stall for time. Yan Hanwu said. Liu wanted to attack but was stopped by him. This was an opportunity because he knew what was going on. Although he had not seen Farukra Daizuan in person, he already knew when Farukra Daizuan appeared. This expert had already sent him a message when he appeared. He had already seen through his thoughts and was trying his best to cooperate with him. In other words, this was Farukra Daizuan's plan. He had already predicted and calculated everything. Because of this, he only let Liu bring along this incarnation in order to plot against the great sage. Although the great sage was powerful, it was only a part of him. Only his head was left, and this head was still sealed. Even though Misery's Sea Holy Man was frantically trying to open the seal, it was too difficult. Even though there was only a trace of the seal left, the seal could be completely broken as long as it was opened. However, this trace of the seal was like an extremely sturdy steel door that was difficult to tear open. At least, with Misery's Sea Holy Man's power, he would not be able to completely break it within a few hours. Of course, what puzzled Yan Hanwu was that Farukra Daizuan was so powerful. If he paid a higher price and gave Liu 2 talismans, wouldn't it be foolproof? However, Farukra Daizuan did not do so. Furthermore, this incarnation was not particularly powerful. Furthermore, he knew that Liu would definitely be tricked and Misery's Sea Holy Man would definitely betray him. Hence, he did not make any preparations. This made Yan Hanwu puzzled. If this world and this universe were under his control, there was no reason for the great sage to be so arrogant. It seemed like this was a test left behind by Farukra Daizuan. Yes, this was a test. Yan Hanwu took a deep breath. This was a test left behind by Farukra Daizuan. It seemed like this was left behind to deal with him and Liu. What was Farukra Daizuan's purpose? In reality, Yan Hanwu believed that with Farukra Daizuan's power and calculations, he would not leave behind such a flaw. He would not leave behind such a huge threat and such a flaw in his own base. What was his purpose? Yan Hanwu did not know. He could not ask Farukra Daizuan now. However, he would ask sooner or later. Damned ancient wilderness, go to hell. At this moment, the great sage also realized that something was wrong. He was also a great Dao master and his power was not weaker than Farukra Daizuan's. However, he realized that there was a huge gap between his power and Farukra Daizuan's. He had already discovered that something was wrong with this incarnation of Ancient Desolation Supreme Venerate. This incarnation estimated the strength of Ancient Desolation Supreme Venerate's original body. Ancient Desolation Supreme Venerate's original body should have the strength to kill this incarnation, but why didn't he do so? What did this mean? It meant that he had been tricked. It meant that Furukura Daizuin did not kill him and even left a flaw in his seal. He deliberately left a flaw so that he could break the seal at this moment. Even Misery's Sea Holy Man was a pawn. In order to seal him, how could the cultivator who was sent to guard him and suppress his physical body be so easily tricked and bewitched by him to become one of his men? If he was so easily tricked, would he still be called Ancient Wilderness? That old thing Ancient Desolation had always been famous for his schemes. Back then, didn't Master think highly of him because of his unparalleled intelligence? But in fact, he had overlooked one thing, and that was Gu Huang's own strength. Gu Huang's strength had long surpassed his own, but he had deliberately concealed his cultivation. In fact, even when he was defeated in the great battle back then, Gu Huang did not reveal his true strength. It was also because Ancient Wilderness was too careful and too focused on scheming that Yi Qingyu was able to take advantage of him and destroy the great Tao of this great cosmos. In the end, I was tricked. Tao Destroyer Holy Master smiled bitterly. In fact, as long as Ancient Desolation placed a seal on the person who was sent to guard his body, the other party would never be judged. Tao Destroyer Holy Master was not as strong as Ancient Desolation, so it was basically impossible for him to break the seal. However, he managed to break the seal on Bitter Sea Holy Master at this time. Tao Destroyer Holy Master could not help but sigh. That old bastard Ancient Desolation's scheme was too powerful and too terrifying. It was no wonder that old man would make Ancient Wilderness his successor. However, he would not give up so easily. If Ancient Wilderness wanted him to be a pawn, he would have to pay the price. As he thought of this, the great sage's eyes flashed with a terrifying cold light. He exploded with all his strength and punched out heavily on Furukura Daizuin's avatar. Furukura Daizuin's body exploded with terrifying energy and collided with the great sage's overbearing punch. Instantly, the entire illusory demon abyss was illuminated. In the illusory demon abyss, many mountains were destroyed by this terrifying impact and turned into endless nothingness. There was no possibility of recovery. Chapter 2174. Do you want me to become this brat's stepping stone? It's not that easy. How can a mere dominator make me his stepping stone? You must be dreaming. The great sage snorted and changed his target. He gave up attacking Furukura Daizuin's avatar and charged toward Yan Hanwu. This sudden change caught even Yan Hanwu a little off guard, let alone the others. Even Furukura Daizuin's avatar was taken aback. He had never expected that the great sage would give up attacking him and turn toward Yan Hanwu. This was not what he wanted to see. Yan Hanwu and Lu Yu were part of his plan from the very beginning. He had been scheming for many years to cultivate Yan Hanwu, who was a variable. He was also the one who had the most potential to become a pinnacle universe overlord. He had never exposed Yan Hanwu because he was too special. His body was very special, and so was his soul. It could be said that Yan Hanwu was one of a kind in this universe. His talent was unparalleled. If the great beings from the outer regions of the universe knew about Yan Hanwu, they would definitely think of ways to kill him. If that happened, all his scheming would be for naught. It could be said that this avatar of his existed in this world of the God domain just to cultivate Yan Hanwu. He wanted to cultivate a universe overlord so that this great universe could occupy a place in the endless void. Be careful. Furukura Daizuin gave a warning. His body transformed into a beam of light and chased after the great sage. His speed was also very fast. He threw out a punch. The target of this punch was, of course, the great sage. The power of this punch was very domineering and shocking. Even the great sage would be severely injured if he were to take this punch. He would not be able to fight back. However, the great sage seemed to have given up on defense. He ignored Furukura Daizuin's punch and allowed it to hit him. He himself was still charging toward Yan Hanwu. Yan Hanwu smiled bitterly. The great sage hated him so much that he was willing to risk his life to attack him. He had to admit that his current strength was not enough to compete with the great sage. After all, the great sage was a great Tao master now. Even if he was far from his peak state and only a part of his body was left, he was still very terrifying. Even if there was only a small gap between a great Tao master and a Tao master, there was a world of difference, let alone a great Tao master and a sovereign. There was a gap of 3 large realms between them. This gap was simply impossible to make up. Even if Yan Hanwu was very talented and powerful, he would not be able to do it. However, it was fortunate that Yan Hanwu had already made arrangements and plans. In addition, the formation here was not ordinary. This was originally the place where Farokura Daizuan had sealed the great sage. The formation and restriction here only needed to be slightly rearranged. Coupled with the powerful energy here, it would be enough to activate the formation again. Clang! The moment the great sage appeared in front of Yan Hanwu quickly formed 2 seals with his hands. These 2 seals immediately activated the original sealing formation and restriction. Bam! Just as the great sage's fist was about to hit Yan Hanwu, the entire space exploded with a dazzling light. A light curtain appeared and blocked the great sage's attack and even sent him flying. On the other side, the attack of Farokura Daizuan's clone had already hit the great sage's body. At this moment, the great sage suffered a huge blow. His entire body seemed to be on the verge of breaking apart. From this, one could see how powerful and domineering Farokura Daizuan's attack was. However, the Tao Destroyer Supreme Venerate did not dissipate after taking this overbearing blow. Although he was seriously injured, it was not a fatal blow to him. On the contrary, the Ancient Desolation Supreme Venerate's clone had consumed too much power and did not have enough energy left to maintain it. The entire clone seemed somewhat illusory and its aura was very weak. It was impossible for it to unleash such a powerful attack again. So, you are also trying to stall for time. The great sage looked at Farokura Daizuan and then at Yan Hanwu. He took a deep breath. He was seriously injured and knew that he no longer had a chance. The formation in this space had been repaired again. Although he could still stand here, he was in fact already sealed in a narrow space and could not leave. Similarly, he could not attack Yan Hanwu. A figure walked out from the darkness and looked at Yan Hanwu. His eyes were filled with hatred and resentment. This figure was none other than the Misery Sea Holy Man. This was the real Misery Sea Holy Man originally. The Misery Sea Holy Man was only a step away from destroying the formation and restriction seal that sealed the Great Sage. Furthermore, he had already released the Great Sage's original body. As long as the formation was completely destroyed, the seal would be completely removed. Then, the Great Sage would be truly free and would be able to do whatever he wanted. He would be invincible in the divine realm and no one would be able to stop him. Furthermore, at that time, he would be able to obtain the Great Sage's help and directly possess Yan Hanwu. He would be able to obtain a new life and reach a higher level. However, because of Yan Hanwu, all of this was destroyed. He actually repaired the formation and restriction seal in such a short period of time. How could he not be angry? At the beginning, when Farokura Daizuan's avatar appeared, he was very anxious. He was very clear about Farokura Daizuan's strength. He was too strong, so strong that no one could think of resisting him. If not for the fact that the Great Sage was already free to move at that time, he would not have dared to continue. Success had been right in front of his eyes, but everything had been destroyed by Yan Hanwu. He was about to die, and his vitality had reached its end. Even his soul had been infected by the aura of dusk and had withered. This meant that he was about to die. An unavoidable death. Even his soul would not exist and he would not be able to reincarnate. Misery Sea Holy Man, I did not expect you to betray me. At this moment, Farokura Daizuan opened his mouth and said, "So what? You can't give me what I want. I was about to succeed, but it's all this little B*****'s fault. He ruined everything for me." At this moment, the Misery Sea Holy Man burned his remaining life and soul. He exploded with unprecedented power and formed a curse seal. This curse seal instantly locked onto Yan Hongwu. Chapter 2175. Curse Seal, another soul curse seal. This left Yan Hongwu speechless. The soul curse seal left behind by the Misery Sea holy man was different from the previous one. The previous soul curse seal only locked onto his aura and position, allowing others to find his location. However, this soul curse seal was different. It sealed off his path of advancement. Yang Hongwu was furious. He felt that if he couldn't break this soul curse seal, it would mean that he wouldn't be able to advance to the next realm. His cultivation wouldn't be able to advance even a little bit. The curse of breaking path. Lu Yu's expression changed when he saw this soul curse seal. It was too late to stop it. Furokura Daizuen heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. What's the curse of breaking path? Zi Xintong and the others didn't know what was going on. They looked at Lu Yu and asked. The art of curse was indeed strange, especially when a Dao master used all his strength, including the strength of his flesh, blood, and soul, to curse a person. How powerful and terrifying it was. It was impossible to remove the art of curses without cultivating it. Jing Qiushuang and Zi Xintong were naturally very worried when they saw that Yan Hongwu was cursed. The curse of breaking path is a very strange and vicious curse. It won't kill anyone, but it can sever one's path of cultivation. The so-called curse of breaking path is to sever one's path of cultivation. Lu Yu explained. Haha, ancient desolation, you've miscalculated. I also know the curse of breaking path. The great sage seemed to have gone mad at this moment. He looked at Yan Hongwu and said, there's the aura of a venerable Dao defiant on him. Not bad. It seems like he's being targeted by that little guy. The great sage was an extraordinary figure, so he had naturally noticed the aura of the Exalt Dao Defiance. In the great sage's opinion, the Exalt Dao Defiance were a junior with boundless prospects, and it was very likely that the Exalt Dao would be able to charge into the Grand Dao realm. Actually, the Exalt Dao Defiant had been a peerless expert in his past life as well. He was a Grand Exalt of the Dao Defiant, and he was called the Exalt of the Dao Defiant. At that time, the Exalt Dao Defiant was even stronger than the Exalt Dao Defiant. However, some special reasons had caused the Exalt Dao Defiant to perish, and then he reincarnated to become the current Exalt Dao Defiant. So, it wasn't easy for the Exalt Dao Defiant to recover his peak strength from his past life. Now, the great sage was naturally very happy when he noticed the aura of the Exalt Dao Defiance on Yan Hongwu. Obviously, the Exalt Dao Defiance had targeted Yan Hongwu. The Exalt Dao Defiance strength had already arrived at its limits. So long as he was able to find the inheritance of his past life, then he would immediately be able to charge through his current realm of cultivation and become a Grand Dao Exalt. TSK. At that time, Yang Hongwu would definitely not be able to resist. That was something that the great sage was very happy to see. Dao Destroyer, I suggest that you don't act rashly. You don't have a chance. Perhaps you'll be able to see the light of day once more if you're obedient. Furokura Daizuen gazed at the great sage as he spoke. He didn't have the time or the ability to stop the great sage. If the great sage burned his flesh and soul to curse Yan Hongwu like the embittered Sea Daoist had, then the formations and restrictions here wouldn't be able to stop him. You won't be able to stop me. The great sage roared with laughter. I only have a portion of my physical body here. Even if I exhaust it, it's fine. I still have a chance to be reborn. Unless your true body comes, no one will be able to save this kid. With that, the great sage burned a portion of his flesh and soul, leaving only a trace behind. Most of it transformed into a purplish-black curse seal. This curse seal was like a purplish-black venomous snake. It instantly broke through the layers of restrictions and entered Yan Hongwu's forehead in the blink of an eye. He didn't even have time to react before the curse seal entered his body. After the curse seal entered his body, Yan Hongwu discovered that there was a huge shackle in the depths of his soul. This shackle was originally formed from the embittered Sea Daoist's full power. Now, with the addition of the great sage's power, this shackle was even more secure and stable. It was like a steel cage that suppressed the depths of his soul and made it impossible for him to break out. With the appearance of the shackle, Yang Hanwu was no longer able to sense the power of laws and natural order. Not to mention the power of the Great Way. This meant that Yang Hanwu's power was greatly reduced and there was no possibility of a breakthrough. This left Yang Hanwu speechless. When one's cultivation reached a certain level, it was impossible to increase one's cultivation realm just by absorbing the power of heaven and earth. However, it was fortunate that Yang Hanwu's devouring furnace could still be used. Although the devouring furnace could absorb energy, it couldn't increase Yang Hanwu's cultivation realm. It couldn't allow him to comprehend the laws of heaven and earth, let alone the laws of the Great Way. Without comprehending the laws of the Great Way, it was impossible to enter the Tao Lord realm. The symbol of the Tao Lord realm was comprehending the laws of the Great Way. Without comprehending the laws of the Great Way, it was impossible to enter the Tao Lord realm. Without the Tao, how could a Tao Lord become a Tao Lord? Therefore, the comprehension of the laws of the Great Way was the most crucial. Moreover, without the comprehension of the laws of the Great Way, his inner world, the common people's great world, couldn't be improved. Naturally, his cultivation realm couldn't be improved either. For Yang Hanwu, cultivation was the process of improving his inner world and the common people's great world. As long as he could improve the common people's great world to the level of a heavenly great universe, then his cultivation could reach the level of a universe overlord. However, this wasn't an easy task. Now, Yang Hanwu's common people's great world hadn't reached the level of a great world. It hadn't even reached the level of a heavenly great realm. It hadn't even started to give birth to a small world, so how could it be promoted to a universe? I don't have much time. Yang Hanwu, come here. Farukra Daizuan looked at Yang Hanwu and said. Yang Hanwu frowned slightly when he heard this. Yang Hanwu didn't trust this so-called Farukra Daizuan that much. He had already been hit by several curse marks. These curse marks had formed an unbreakable shackle in his body. This was the most troublesome thing. If he wanted to achieve anything and improve, he had to break this unbreakable shackle. Although the Farukra Daizuan in front of him seemed to have fought with the great sage to protect him, Yang Hanwu knew very well that without him, he wouldn't have fallen to such a state. In the end, the Farukra Daizuan was the main culprit. Chapter 2176. It was precisely because of this that Yang Hanwu did not trust Farukra Daizuan that much. In fact, Yang Hanwu believed that Farukra Daizuan's strength was enough to get rid of the great sage. However, this guy did not do so. Instead, he let Lu Yuan himself handle it, and only sent one of his avatars. In fact, Yang Hanwu had reason to believe that he was cursed by the great sage and the miseries see holy man Farukra Daizuan did it on purpose. Therefore, when Farukra Daizuan asked him to go over, Yang Hanwu was not willing. Who knew if this guy would plot against him and attack him? Farukra Daizuan seemed to see through Yang Hanwu's thoughts and said, "Don't worry, I won't do you any harm. I'm only an avatar, and I've already used up too much of my energy. I can't do you any harm. Besides, if I wanted to deal with you, I would have done it from the start. Why wait until now?" Hearing this, Lu Yu said, "Ah Wu, Master won't do you any harm. I can guarantee that." Since Lu Yu had already spoken, Yang Hanwu also let go of his worries. After all, Lu Yu was still trustworthy. He did not believe that Lu Yu would plot against him. Furthermore, even if Farukra Daizuan's avatar wanted to deal with him now, it was already impossible. He was only an avatar, and his strength was limited. Furthermore, what he said just now was reasonable. If he wanted to plot against him, he would not have waited until now. Yes. Yang Hanwu took a few steps closer, looked at Farukra Daizuan and said, "Elder, what do you want to say?" When Yang Hanwu came closer, Farukra Daizuan explained, "I can't remove the power of the curse on your body now. Even if my original body was here, it would not be easy to remove the curse mark on your body. I'm only an avatar. I won't be of much help to the power of the curse in your body, but I can help you suppress it temporarily." With that, Furukura Daizuan's body turned into a ray of white light and instantly entered Yang Hongwu's body. Yang Hongwu felt the shackles formed by the curse mark in the depths of his soul shake. The power of the law appeared. This was the power of the great law. Yang Hongwu smiled bitterly inside. That supreme sovereign ancient desolation hadn't harmed him, nor had he schemed against him. In fact, he had helped him. That strand of law was something that supreme sovereign ancient desolation had used the last of his strength to send into the depths of his soul. The shackles opened a crack and released the power of the law. In other words, he could only mobilize this power of the law. As for the other powers of the law, he could not use them at all. Once he used this power of the law, it would be consumed. However, even so, it was still a great help to him. Although he was unable to break the seal of the curse power and destroy the shackles, he could continue to strengthen the power of the law. Once he was able to do so, he would be able to. Once the power of the law was condensed to the extreme, his cultivation could still be improved. Moreover, once he could break the shackles and devour the power of the curse shackles, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. Relatively speaking, the shackles formed by the power of the curse were a kind of training for him. Although it temporarily blocked his path of breakthrough, once he broke through this obstacle, the path ahead would be bright. Therefore, this was not necessarily a bad thing. However, what Yang Hongwu needed now was great power. After all, he did not know what kind of existence the enemy he was about to face was, and he did not know how strong the enemy was. "Husband, are you okay?" After Yang Hongwu came back to his senses, Jin Qiushuang hurried over and asked in a worried tone. She looked at Yang Hongwu and asked. For Jin Qiushuang, Yang Hongwu was the only one in her life. She did not want to see Yang Hongwu suffer any harm. She was willing to exchange her life for his. Yang Hongwu shook his head and said, I'm fine, I'm fine. Although the power of the curse was extremely harmful to him, and it could be said that his strength was not even 1/3 of his peak, Yang Hongwu did not want Jin Qiushuang and the others to worry. Therefore, he pretended to be calm. However, he had to be careful in the future. Now, what he wanted to do was to completely devour and refine the energy of the demonic insects that Lu Yu had condensed, as well as the huge Tao-grade spiritual vein in the illusory demon abyss. Although he could not cultivate the law of the Great Path, he could still use the devouring furnace to devour the majestic energy. This energy could not only replenish his inner world, which was the common people's great world, but also greatly improve his physical body. Now, we have found the person we are looking for. We can leave the illusory demon abyss. At this moment, Zi Xintong spoke. In the illusory demon abyss, the misery sea holy man had died, and the great sage had been completely sealed. It could be said that the illusory demon abyss was no longer the illusory demon abyss of the past. Although it was still very dangerous, it was not as terrifying as before. After such a terrifying battle, almost 80% of the illusory demon abyss and the illusory demon mountain range had been destroyed. Of course, it was precisely because of this battle that the illusory demon mountain range and the illusory demon abyss were now in greater danger. This was because the space here had become very unstable, and there were many weak spatial cracks. These spatial cracks were directly connected to the endless void. If one was not careful or unlucky and fell into these spatial cracks, it would be extremely dangerous. It could be said that if one was weak and did not comprehend the law of space, entering into the void was impossible. Being trapped in the void was equivalent to being sentenced to death. Of course, Zi Xintong could feel such danger. It was the same for Lu Yu. However, if Lu Yu were to fall into such a spatial crack, she would still be able to escape with her strength. Yes, it's time to leave. It's too dangerous here. Lu Yu also nodded and said, Ah Wu, let's go to my residence first. You can find out what you want to know there. There's no hurry. Yang Hongwu shook his head and said, I'm about to break through. Yang Hongwu had already reached the edge of a breakthrough when he devoured the energy of those demon insects. However, because of the special nature of those demon insects, Yang Hongwu did not directly make a great breakthrough. At this moment, he had to do so. Otherwise, he would not be able to improve the law of the great path in his sea of consciousness in a very short time. Chapter 2177. It's too dangerous to break through here. The space here is extremely unstable. I suggest that we leave this place first. Lu Yu said. Jing Qiushuang and Zi Xintong were also worried after hearing this. After all, the space here was too unstable. Moreover, the heaven and earth spiritual qi here contained demonic thoughts. These demonic thoughts wouldn't pose any threat to Yang Hanwu under normal circumstances. However, this didn't mean that the heaven and earth spiritual qi here couldn't affect him at all. It was very crucial during cultivation. Even the slightest influence could cause a terrible disaster. If Yang Hanwu were to cultivate here, he would be affected by the demonic will and develop a heart demon. It would be very troublesome. Don't worry, I know what to do. Yang Hanwu was very clear about their thoughts. This place was indeed very dangerous and the space was extremely unstable. However, this was exactly what Yang Hanwu wanted. Because the great Tao law in his sea of consciousness was the space law. Therefore, cultivating here would be very helpful for him to comprehend the space law. If he could devour and refine the chaotic space law in this space, he would be able to improve the space law in his sea of consciousness. This was what Yang Hanwu considered. If he left here and cultivated in the outside world, his comprehension and improvement of the space law would definitely not be as good as cultivating here. Therefore, Yang Hanwu had made some preparations and considerations when he cultivated here. Even though there was a certain amount of risk here, in terms of the rewards, the risk was completely worth it. Alright, since you've said so, we'll stand guard for you. At this moment, Lu Yu said. Since Yang Hanwu had already made up his mind, it wouldn't be good for her to change it. She also believed in Yang Hanwu. If he dared to say and do so, he should have enough confidence. She was very clear about Yang Hanwu's character. Although Yang Hanwu didn't have any great achievements at that time, he had always been a man of his word. Moreover, no matter what he did, he would always consider 3 steps before taking one step. He would never fight a battle that he wasn't confident in. Therefore, even though she knew that this place was very dangerous, she would still support Yang Hanwu's decision since he had already made it. Of course, Jing Qiushuang also supported Yang Hanwu. She would unconditionally choose to trust Yang Hanwu no matter what he said. It's okay. The space here is unstable. When I cultivate, it will cause turbulence in the space. It's very dangerous for you, so it's best for you to leave here first. Yang Hanwu shook his head and said. Indeed, when he cultivated, he would devour the space law here. Once he devoured the space law and the power of space here, the space here would become even more unstable. Once he devoured too much of the power of the space law, this side of the world, this side of the space, may directly collapse. In that case, it would be too dangerous for Jing Qiushuang and the others to stay here. Once they fell into the space crack and were pulled into the endless void, he didn't have enough confidence to save them. No, I won't leave. I'll stay here to protect you. Jing Qiushuang shook her head and said, if something happens to you, I won't live alone. At this moment, Jing Qiushuang's eyes were filled with determination. Zi Xintong and Lu Yu looked at each other and saw the determination in each other's eyes. Lu Yu said, let's all stay here. If anything happens here, I can still help you. Although my strength hasn't reached the Tao Master realm, I'm able to contend with a Tao Master realm warrior. Looking at the expressions of the 3 women, Yang Hanwu thought for a moment and estimated that it was impossible for him to let the 3 women leave. Therefore, he said, well, since all of you are staying, I'll first set up a formation. This formation can protect all of you. As long as nothing happens to me, nothing will happen to you. After a pause, Yang Hanwu added, however, you can't leave the formation I set up. Otherwise, I won't be able to protect your safety. Hearing Yang Hanwu's words, the 3 women nodded. To Lu Yu, she was the strongest. Although she believed that she was much stronger than Yang Hanwu, if she couldn't protect herself, Yang Hanwu definitely couldn't protect her. However, since Yang Hanwu had said so, she couldn't refute him. Otherwise, it would hurt Yang Hongwoo's self-esteem. In fact, what she didn't know was that Yang Hongwoo's attainments and formations were very strong. Moreover, the formation he was going to set up this time was to use his own inner world, which was the common people's great world and the great seal of the common people's great seal as the core of the formation. Once this spatial world collapsed, then this formation would directly teleport the three women into the common people's great world. Of course, the three women were very strong. The weakest, Jin Qiushuang, was already at the Tao Lord realm. For Yang Hongwu, whose cultivation was only at the sovereign realm, if three Tao Lord experts entered, it might pose a huge threat to the common people's great world. It might even cause the laws of the common people's great world to collapse. However, if it really reached that stage, Yang Hongwu couldn't care less. At least, they would be fine. That would cause considerable damage to his inner world. However, this loss could still be made up. After the three women nodded in agreement, Yang Hongwu began to set up the formation. His hands kept forming seals, and rays of light kept flashing. In the sky, a huge seal appeared. This huge seal contained boundless power of the common people. This was the Great Seal of Common People. Although the Great Seal of Common People was still incomplete, the power it contained was already very terrifying and powerful. If it was at its peak and Yang Hongwu's strength was a little stronger, with the help of the Great Seal of Common People, Yang Hongwu would be able to contend with experts at the Tao Master realm. However, Yang Hongwu's current cultivation was too low. He was still far from being able to display the strongest state of the Great Seal of Common People. Of course, if Yang Hongwu integrated the entire common people's divine realm into the Great Seal of Common People's great world, then his strength would really break through and reach the Tao Lord realm. At that time, if he used the Great Seal of Common People again, he would definitely be able to erupt with power comparable to that of a Tao Master expert. He could really prove that he could contend with experts at the Tao Master realm, and even kill them. What a rich power of the common people, what a strong world power. When Liu Yu saw Yang Hongwu use the Great Seal of Common People, she knew this point. She was very surprised. Yang Hongwu's source world, this was definitely his source world. Although his current inner world hadn't really reached the level of the divine realm, it was no small matter. As long as there were enough resources, his world could be upgraded. Chapter 2178. This is a formation with the world as the core of the formation. At this time, Zi Xintong also realized that the formation arranged by Yang Hongwu was using his world as the core to suppress the formation. Once this formation was broken, it would cause great damage to Yang Hongwu's inner world. She knew, Liu Yu also knew, Jin Qiushuang also knew, the three women were very moved. Apart from being moved, they also felt a little regretful. If something really happened, the first to be injured would definitely be Yang Hongwu. Once his inner world was damaged, the injuries caused would be very serious. However, at this time, it was too late to regret. At this moment, Yang Hongwu had already finished arranging the formation and he had already entered a state of cultivation. They saw Yang Hongwu sitting cross-legged in the middle of the formation. The surrounding heaven and earth Ling Qi madly swarmed towards Yang Hongwu's position. Terrifying energy fluctuations erupted from Yang Hongwu's body. His whole body's aura was constantly rising, becoming more and more terrifying. An ancient and majestic furnace appeared above his head, continuously swallowing the surrounding heaven and earth Ling Qi into the furnace. An incomparably bright red lotus wrapped around Yang Hongwu's body. The surrounding heaven and earth Ling Qi contained in the heaven and earth Ling Qi was burned by the flames emitted by this lotus, eliminating it. This was the red lotus of karmic fire. Although Lianer still hadn't awakened, Yang Hongwu could borrow her power to refine the heaven and earth Ling Qi contained in the heaven and earth Ling Qi. In this way, not only would it be of great help to Yang Hongwu, but it would also be of great help to the fire lotus. This was because the fire lotus had been sleeping for a long time. Because when Yang Hongwu used the karmic fire of the red lotus, the fire lotus was constantly swallowing the energy and obtaining a great improvement. The space is beginning to fluctuate. He is actually swallowing the power of space here. At this time, Liu discovered that Yang Hanwu was not only swallowing the heaven and earth Ling Qi here, but also the power of space here. This seemed to be Yang Hanwu's real purpose. If this continued, Yang Hanwu would devour all the spatial energy here, which might cause the space here to become more and more unstable. It might even cause the space here to collapse. It was precisely because of this that Liu became more and more worried at this time. If the space collapsed, although she was strong enough, she couldn't stop it, and she couldn't protect so many people. If it was really a last resort, she would choose to protect Yang Hanwu. As for Jin Qiushuang and Zi Xintong, it would depend on their luck. After all, in Liyu's heart, Yang Hanwu was the first. As for Jin Qiushuang and Zi Xintong, it was her fault for underestimating them. As a modern person, Liu was also a transmigrator. Even if she was here and had been influenced by this world, she couldn't change her mind. Even if her concept of monogamy had changed, it wouldn't change completely. In her heart, she was still a little dissatisfied with Yang Hongwu's situation of having a group of wives. Even if there was a special reason, because of Yang Hongwu's special physique and cultivation technique, she couldn't completely let go of the grudge in her heart. As time passed, the space in the illusory demon abyss became more and more unstable, and the devouring power of the devouring furnace above Yang Hongwu's head became more and more amazing. The surrounding heaven and earth Ling Qi and the power of space were constantly being swallowed. The furnace seemed to be a bottomless pit, as if no matter how much energy there was, it couldn't be filled. The more they looked, the more shocked and worried Liu and the other two women became. Could he completely refine so much energy? If he couldn't completely refine it, if this continued, perhaps before this space collapsed, his entire body would explode. Once he exploded, it wouldn't just be his physical body that would explode, but his soul would also collapse. That would be equivalent to dying, and he wouldn't even be able to reincarnate. However, Liu and Jin Qiushuang still trusted Yang Hanwu. They understood Yang Hongwu's character, and so did Zi Xintong. Even if they trusted him, they couldn't help but worry. After all, this man occupied a very important position in their hearts. While Yang Hanwu was crazily refining the energy, including the energy of the demonic insects, his cultivation had already risen to a limit. However, because of the huge shackle in his soul sea of consciousness, no matter how much energy Yang Hanwu devoured, he couldn't break through the bottleneck and raise his cultivation realm. These energies were crazily merged into the common people's great world and his physical body by Yang Hanwu, constantly increasing the strength of his physical body. His immortal dragon body was raised to the limit. The common people's great world was also constantly improving. However, the source of this world didn't undergo any qualitative changes. Although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth became denser, it didn't undergo any qualitative changes, and the laws didn't undergo any qualitative changes. For a world, if it wanted to undergo a huge improvement, it needed a qualitative change, an increase in the laws. Only then would it be a true evolution. Obviously, although the energy of the common people's great world had increased, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth became denser, the laws didn't undergo a qualitative change, and the world wouldn't rise to a higher level. Break for me! Yang Hanwu let out a furious roar. His entire body trembled as he began to transform. His body began to grow. 3 feet, 5 feet, 9 feet, 15 feet. In an instant, Yang Hanwu had turned into a giant. His fleshly body had reached its limit, but the devouring power continued to increase. As a result, Yang Hongwu's fleshly body began to grow. Seeing Yang Hanwu grow bigger and bigger, Liu and the other two girls became more and more worried. They were very clear that the reason why their physical bodies were growing like this was because they had devoured too much energy. These energies weren't completely refined, and didn't truly merge into their bodies. They weren't able to control them, which led to such a situation. Of course, if it was a heaven and earth dharma, then it was a different story. We can't go on like this. We have to think of a way to help Yang Hanwu. At this moment, Zi Xintong said to Liu and Jin Qiushuang. Wait a little longer. I believe in him. At this moment, Liu shook her head. She could see that if Yan Hanwu really couldn't control it, he would say it. Since he didn't have any intention of asking for help, it proved that he could still control it. This was within her expectations. I believe my husband can do it, Jing Qiushuang said with a firm tone. The three girls were very nervous, and they stared at Yan Hanwu. At this moment, waves of fluctuations appeared in the void. At this moment, the three girls felt the fluctuations in the void, and their faces turned ugly. An external force had appeared. Was it a friend or a foe? Chapter 2179. We absolutely cannot allow them to disturb my husband. At this moment, Jing Qiushuang's eyes flickered with a cold light. She knew that Yan Hanwu should be at a critical moment in his cultivation. Once he was disturbed, he would most likely suffer a great backlash. Lu Yu nodded. She was the strongest, so of course she knew very well. However, this formation was set up by Yan Hanwu. He had set up restrictions. Without Yan Hanwu opening the formation, they would not be able to leave. If they forcibly opened the formation, it would also affect Yan Hanwu. Let's wait and see. We cannot leave the formation set up by Awu. If we forcibly leave, Awu may be injured, Lu Yu said. Moreover, Awu should be aware of the situation. We should wait for a while. If the other party really comes with ill intentions, then we will act. That's right. Zi Xintong nodded. Sister Yu was right. Zi Xintong understood. She could see that Lu Yu held a very high position in Yan Hongwu's heart. Moreover, Lu Yu's strength was also very valiant. Her origin was also very extraordinary. It was precisely because of this that Zi Xintong was willing to call Lu Yu elder sister. She was a smart person. As for Jing Qiushuang, she did not care about any of this. She had already let go of everything. As long as Yan Hanwu had her in his heart, everything was enough. She also understood that Yan Hanwu would not give up on any of them. If it was in the past, perhaps she would still fight for it. However, after experiencing the separation of life and death, she no longer had such thoughts. As long as she could be together with Yan Hanwu, as long as she could always be by his side, everything else was already enough. Nothing else was important. At this moment, he was indeed at a critical moment in his cultivation. He had already begun to condense that one strand of nomological law. That strand of nomological law was becoming more and more powerful as it continued to devour the surrounding nomological law. However, although that strand of nomological law was being condensed, its speed was not fast. If it was not for the existence of the cursed shackles, Yan Hongwu's speed of condensing nomological law would be much, much faster. However, compared to before, it could be said to be a world of difference. The disparity was too great, and they could not be mentioned in the same breath. This speed made Yan Hanwu very depressed, but there was nothing he could do. He could only condense it bit by bit. Outside the array formation, Yan Hanwu naturally felt the spatial fluctuations. Yan Hanwu was cultivating the law of space, so he was very sensitive to spatial fluctuations. The moment the other party appeared, Yan Hanwu had already sensed it. The spatial energy of the illusory demon abyss was constantly being devoured by him, causing the space of the illusory demon abyss to continuously absorb the spatial energy of the endless void. As a result, the spatial origin of this world fluctuated, and experts from other worlds sensed it. Yan Hanwu didn't know why they were here, but he was sure that they didn't have any good intentions towards Yan Hanwu. Although they might not be enemies, they were definitely not friends. They were probably here to hunt for treasures. On the other hand, Yan Hanwu didn't want to see Exalted Tao Defiance the most. He hoped that they weren't on the side of the Exalted Tao Defiance. If they were, then it would definitely be a fierce battle, and only one of them would be able to survive. It could be said that he'd become the obsession of the Exalted Tao Defiance, or perhaps it could be said that he was obstructing the Exalted Tao Defiance from attaining the Tao. Only by killing Yan Hanwu would the Exalted Tao Defiance be able to attain the Tao and break through. So, Yan Hanwu didn't want to see the Exalted Tao Defiance or the people of the Exalted Tao Defiance. A rift appeared in space. 3 people walked out from within the rift. They wore golden Taoist robes that had a leaf embroidered on them. It was the leaf of the ancient golden tree. The ancient golden tree was one of the spirit roots of the primeval times. It was extremely powerful and could compare with the primeval world tree. There was only one sect that used the leaf of the ancient golden tree as a symbol, the ancient Spirit Tao sect. It was rumored that the ancient Spirit Tao sect's old ancestor was an ancient golden tree. It had been a long time since the ancient Spirit Tao sect had appeared in the myriad worlds. Who would have thought that someone from the ancient Spirit Tao sect would actually appear here? This was very surprising. This is troublesome, Lu Yu said. She had only heard of the ancient Spirit Tao sect, but now that she saw them, she could recognize them. The people of the ancient Spirit Tao sect were extremely domineering. So, they were probably enemies and not friends. Who are these people? Zi Xintong looked at Lu Yu and asked. She didn't know these people. The ancient Spirit Tao sect was only recorded in the upper world. It was rumored that Zi Xintong hadn't been to the ancient divine domain, so she naturally didn't know about the existence of the ancient Spirit Tao sect. However, from the looks of it, the 3 of them weren't weak, but they couldn't be very powerful either. If the 3 of them joined hands, they might be able to deal with them. However, after hearing Lu Yu's words, Zi Xintong still asked. After all, since Lu Yu said so, it meant that these people weren't simple and weren't to be trifled with. After all, no opponent, no enemy, could be underestimated. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy would you be able to win 100 battles. Zi Xintong deeply understood this point. She had experienced too many things in the demon domain. Moreover, she had seen too many cruel things in her inherited memories. So, she didn't dare to take any risks. If I'm not wrong, these people are from the ancient Spirit Tao sect, Lu Yu explained. I've seen in the ancient books that the disciples of the ancient Spirit Tao sect use the leaf of the ancient golden tree as the symbol of their sect. The robes of these 3 people are embroidered with the leaf of the ancient golden tree. So, they should be from the ancient Spirit Tao sect. Ancient Spirit Tao sect? Jing Qiushuang asked. What sect is that? I've never heard of it in the divine domain. How strong are they? The ancient Spirit Tao sect is very strong. They haven't appeared in the divine domain for a long time. Rumor has it that the ancient Spirit Tao sect has entered the depths of the endless void and established their own universe. The ancient golden tree is already a universe overlord. As for whether it's true or not, no one knows. Lu Yu shook his head and said. He looked at the 3 people with a solemn expression. They're that strong? Hearing Lu Yu's words, Zi Xintong and Jing Qiushuang's expressions became very serious. They felt as if a great battle was about to happen. Ancient Spirit Tao sect? At this moment, a voice sounded. It was Yang Hanwu. He had already stood up. Ah Wu, you finished cultivating? Lu Yu was pleasantly surprised when he saw Yang Hanwu. However, when he turned his head, he realized that Yang Hanwu was still cultivating. It seemed like this was just a clone. 1 qi into 3 pure ones. Lu Yu continued. I didn't expect your 1 qi into 3 pure ones to have reached such a level. Chapter 2180. Yang Hanwu smiled and said, It's nothing. It's just a small trick. In Yang Hanwu's view, the I Qi into Trinity secret technique was just a small trick. The real secret techniques and divine powers were not these. Only when one's strength reached a certain level, there was no need for the so-called incarnation. Even a strand of hair could transform into a peerless expert. It could even evolve into a world or a universe. That was the real power. Yang Hongwu's current strength was far from enough. In fact, only the weak needed the so-called divine powers and secret techniques. The real experts did not need to do anything. They only needed to stand there and they would be invincible. That was the real invincibility. Husband, these 3 people have come with ill intentions. How should we deal with them? At this time, Jing Qiushuang asked with a worried tone. They're just clowns. Not worth mentioning. Although Yang Hanwu was a little apprehensive, he still said it out loud. He did not want Jin Qiushuang to worry. In fact, although the strength of these three people was not bad, Yang Hanwu really did not put them in his eyes. What he was worried about was whether the space in the illusory demon abyss could withstand it. If the space completely collapsed because of his crazy devouring of space origin, it would be really troublesome. For the three of them to be able to appear here, it must have been because they had sensed the fluctuation of space. Yang Hanwu sensed the aura of a space treasure from the leader. It was definitely a space attribute treasure of creation. If he could kill him and seize that space attribute treasure of creation, it would be of great help to him. He could even condense the space Great Tao principle in his sea of consciousness and form a real space Great Tao. Don't be careless. At this moment, Liu Yu said, these three are disciples of the ancient Spirit Tao sect. They don't seem strong, but they have many powerful treasures. It's said that the disciples of the ancient Spirit Tao sect are blessed by the ancient golden tree and contain a strand of the ancient golden tree's consciousness. Once they are in a life or death situation, they will activate the power of the ancient golden tree. Therefore, few people are willing to provoke the disciples of the ancient Spirit Tao sect. The ancient Spirit Tao sect, a sect that has been lost for a long time. Yang Hanwu did not care when he heard this. He said, although they are strong, I am not afraid. There are two things on them that are of great help to me. At this moment, Yang Hanwu not only sensed a space elemental supreme treasure of creation among the three, but he also sensed a very strong vitality. This vitality should be a type of spiritual root of creation. In fact, Yang Hanwu's longevity ancient tree and divine tree of creation were both spiritual roots of creation. If he could snatch the spiritual roots of creation from the three of them, the divine tree of creation and the longevity ancient tree Nini would be able to reach a higher level. In Yang Hanwu's mind, some memories of the ancient Spirit Tao sect appeared. Yang Hanwu didn't like the ancient Spirit Tao sect. He even loathed it, a loathing that came from the depths of his soul. Yang Hanwu knew that his relationship with the ancient Spirit Tao sect in his previous life was not shallow. However, they were enemies, not friends. Therefore, Yang Hanwu had a loathing for the ancient Spirit Tao sect. This loathing made Yang Hanwu very uncomfortable. This meant that the memories of his previous life could affect him, and it was getting stronger and stronger. From the memories, Yang Hanwu knew a lot about the ancient Spirit Tao sect. The ancient Spirit Tao sect was indeed very strong. Moreover, the old antique of the ancient Spirit Tao sect, the ancient golden tree, was very strong. In the memories, he was only half a step away from crossing the threshold and entering a very terrifying realm. That was the legendary overlord of the universe. If that guy was here, this world wouldn't be able to withstand it. If it was just a clone, it was possible. However, the ancient Spirit Tao sect had already left the divine realm. Now that they were here, they should be looking for something. Or they might have accidentally entered this place. Yang Hanwu didn't think that they knew of his existence. If they had a way to know of his existence, they might have appeared long ago. Why would they wait until now? Moreover, his soul and consciousness had been sealed by the power of the curse. It was difficult for them to discover him. Therefore, Yang Hanwu didn't think that these disciples of the ancient Spirit Tao sect had chased after him because of the spiritual aura of his previous life. I didn't expect that there would be such an expert in this world. The leader of the three people from the ancient Spirit Tao sect was a young sect master called Huang Jin Yuan. He had the bloodline inheritance of the ancient golden tree in his body and the sky-piercing escape tool in his hand. This was the spatial attribute supreme treasure of fortune that Yang Hanwu wanted. In his inner world, there was a sapling of the ancient golden tree. It was nurtured by his bloodline power. This showed how high his status in the ancient Spirit Tao sect was. This time, he had entered the all-heavens sacred realm to search for something left behind by the ancient golden tree. It was a branch of the ancient golden tree. I don't care who you are. Leave now. Liu Yu said. You want us to leave? Mui laughed and said loudly, what a joke. Young sect master, this woman wants us to leave? Looks like she doesn't know how strong we are. What do you know? This is just a small world. How could mere natives know about the prestige of the ancient spirit Tao sect? They don't even have the right to know. Therefore, it's normal that they don't know how strong we are. Mu Lian said mockingly. Mu Lian, do you want to fight me? Mu Yi said angrily. Although the two of them were brothers, they didn't get along and were always at odds with each other. Let's fight. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Mu Lian looked at him coldly and said, after so many years, your strength hasn't improved at all. It's easy for me to kill you. Alright, shut up. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan was also a little angry. These two brothers were extremely talented and were his most capable subordinates. However, these two fellas were always at odds with each other. Under normal circumstances, he would not bring both of them out at the same time. However, it was different this time. The matter of searching for the ancestors' branch could not be exposed, not even to the inner circle of the sect. Because of this, he could only bring his two most trusted subordinates, Mu Lian and Mu Yi. Humph. For the sake of the young sect master, you'll die here today. Mu Lian said coldly. You're lucky. Chapter 2181. Ignorance is bliss. I'll give you all one more chance. Huang Jinyuan looked at Lu Yu, Yan Hongwu, and the others. Lu Yu was one of the most outstanding geniuses that Huang Jinyuan had ever seen. She was definitely young, but her cultivation had already reached such a terrifying level. Moreover, this was still the lower realm, and she was only a native of the lower realm. She was actually able to cultivate to such a level without the support of sufficient resources. From this, one could see how terrifying her talent was, and how terrifying it was. She had the potential to become a universe overlord. If such a genius was placed in the endless void, she would be the target of all the great cosmoses. Of course, she would also be hunted down by all the great cosmoses. After all, no one wanted to see their opponent have such a terrifying genius. They also didn't want their opponent to have another universe overlord. Therefore, the great beings of all the great cosmoses attached great importance to such a genius. If she wasn't one of their own, then she was an enemy. Generally speaking, the great cosmoses would use all sorts of methods to protect their own geniuses. Of course, the great beings of the great cosmoses would also use all sorts of methods to deal with the geniuses of their enemies. If they could bring such a genius into the ancient spirit Tao sect, then the strength of the ancient spirit Tao sect would increase tremendously. Of course, if this woman before him was unwilling to become a disciple of the ancient spirit Tao sect, if she was unwilling to join them, then he would have to kill her. Otherwise, if such a genius were to become an enemy, then it would be an enormous test for the ancient spirit Tao sect. However, Huang Jinyuan suddenly regretted his decision. If this woman joined the ancient spirit Tao sect, then his status would be severely affected. His current level of cultivation wasn't far from this woman's, but there was one thing that he couldn't compare to. This woman had cultivated to such a level in the lower domain without sufficient resources. It could be said that her talent was much, much stronger than Huang Jinyuan's. Once she joined the ancient spirit Tao sect, would he still have any status left? Would he be able to keep his position as the young master of the ancient spirit Tao sect? Therefore, if Lu Yu agreed to his request now, he would have a hard time dealing with it. If you don't leave, you'll die. Since Lu Yu knew that Yang Hongwu wanted to obtain the two items from the guy in front of him, how could he let them go? Therefore, it was just a casual remark. Even if they retreated now, Lu Yu would find a way to attack them, even if they were really strong. Die? Mu Lian couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Young master, this woman wants us to die. In my opinion, we should capture her alive, seal her cultivation, and cultivate her into the lowest slave. Hearing this, Lu Yu's eyes flashed coldly. Yang Hongwu was also burning with rage at this moment. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Yang Hongwu harumphed coldly. He turned into a ray of light and charged towards Mu Lian. This guy should be killed for talking nonsense. The moment Yang Hongwu moved, the expressions of Huang Jinyuan and the other two changed drastically. This guy's cultivation was only at the ruler realm, but they didn't expect Yang Hanwu to be so terrifying and powerful. They had never seen such a person in the ancient spirit Dao sect before. He could unleash such powerful combat strength with his ruler realm cultivation. He was strong enough to fight against a peak Dao lord or even a Dao master. How terrifying was his talent! If he was allowed to grow, it would be unimaginable. As long as his cultivation reached the Dao master realm, he would be able to fight against a great Dao master. If he was nurtured to the great Dao master realm, wouldn't it mean that he would be able to fight against the universe overlord? Terrifying, too terrifying. This person couldn't be allowed to live. He was even more terrifying and powerful than that female genius. He didn't expect to meet such terrifying geniuses just by coming to the lower realm to look for the patriarch's branch. For Huang Jinyuan, this was a huge opportunity. If he could kill the two of them, devour their bloodline power, and refine their fortunes, then his fortune, strength, and bloodline would rise to the next level. At the thought of this, Huang Jinyuan's eyes shone brightly. "Catch him!" he shouted. Mu Lian and the other two attacked. Although they were enemies and clashed with each other from time to time, they wouldn't drop the ball at critical moments. They wouldn't ruin Huang Jinyuan's plan. At this moment, the two of them moved. They unleashed a powerful force and charged towards Yang Hanwu. However, just as the two of them were about to attack Yang Hanwu stopped. A barrier appeared in front of him. This barrier blocked the two of them. However, the saber in Yang Hanwu's hand tore through space and slashed towards the two of them. The saber was filled with boundless spatial power. It instantly slashed Mu Lian's body. Mu Lian was caught off guard. He groaned and was pushed back a few hundred feet. Mu Yi didn't have it easy either. Yang Hongwu's attack was aimed at Mu Lian. However, Mu Yi was also hit by the residual power and was sent flying a few feet away. Huang Jinyuan's face was ashen. As the young sect master of the ancient spirit Dao sect, he was naturally knowledgeable. His cultivation had reached the Dao master realm. In the endless void in various universes, the ancient spirit Dao sect's universe was not a top-notch universe and the ancient spirit Dao sect was not a top-notch sect. However, the strength of the ancient spirit Dao sect was unquestionable. Given his high status, he was naturally knowledgeable. The formation set up by the young man in front of him was extremely powerful. It wouldn't be easy for him to break the formation. At least, he wouldn't be able to break the formation in a short period of time. Most importantly, this formation had already trapped them within. This meant that if they wanted to leave, they had to break the formation. The four people in front of him were natives from the lower world. Yet, they wanted to keep them here and kill them. This made him very angry. However, even though he was furious, he did not dare to be careless. This lad was only a sovereign, but he was already so strong. He must have some sort of powerful trump card behind him. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to be so strong. Trash. Huang Jinyuan looked at Mu Lian and Mu Yi. Although the two of them were his right-hand men, he never expected that they wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand against the natives from the lower world. This made him very angry. Even though he knew that the natives in front of him were powerful and it wasn't their fault, he was still angry. Chapter 2182. Mu Lian and Mu Yi's eyes turned red when they heard their master call them trash. They were like raging bulls and couldn't take it anymore. The two of them could be considered top geniuses in the entire ancient spirit Dao sect. However, they had never imagined that they would be suppressed by a mere sovereign realm native in the lower realm with their young master. They couldn't even defeat a mere sovereign realm martial artist. Shameful, too shameful. They had to kill this native to wash away this humiliation. The two of them were like wolves and tigers. After getting up, they charged towards Yang Hanwu again like rabid dogs. However, even though the two of them were crazy this time, they were still very cautious and didn't dare to be as impudent as before. The invisible defensive force from before had already given them a huge impact. Therefore, this time, it was impossible for them to be unprepared like before. Mu Lian and Mu He exchanged glances and drew their weapons at the same time. When they were about to reach Yang Hanwu, the two of them launched their attacks. Two powerful forces, one black and one white, gathered together and attacked Yang Hanwu in an instant. If there was still a formation blocking it like before, then the two of them should be able to tear it apart. However, if there was no formation and restriction, then the damned native would die without a doubt. A mere sovereign realm native couldn't possibly withstand their combined attack. The two of them were only Dao lords, but they had cultivated a combination attack technique. Their combined attack wasn't as simple as 1+1. The power of their combined attack was comparable to that of a Dao sovereign expert. The two of them looked at the direction of the two black and white forces. It was as if they could see Yang Hongwu's death. However, the scene that unfolded in the next moment left the two of them dumbfounded. Something that they had never imagined had happened. An ancient and huge cauldron appeared around Yang Hongwu. After the cauldron appeared, it exploded with dazzling light and formed a huge vortex. This huge vortex formed a terrifying devouring power. In an instant, it devoured the energy of their strongest attack without causing any ripples. Mu He and Mu Lian weren't the only ones who were dumbfounded. Huang Jinyuan was also shocked. Secret divine ability. This was a supreme secret divine ability. It could be a great Dao divine ability. Moreover, it was the rarest and most powerful devouring divine ability. The devouring Great Dao was the most mysterious and terrifying Great Dao among the countless Great Daos. The only Great Daos that could be compared to it were time, space, life, and death. Furthermore, the devouring Great Dao was the most bizarre and had the most terrifying potential. It was rumored that the most powerful devouring Great Dao could devour and fuse with other Great Daos. If the devouring Great Dao was cultivated to a certain extent, it could completely devour an endless universe. It could devour all the other Great Daos and great universes in the endless void. No one could be sure about this. However, based on the rumors, one could tell how terrifying the devouring Great Dao was. Once someone who possessed the devouring Great Dao appeared, they would definitely be hunted down by all the great universes. They wouldn't be willing to nurture a martialist who possessed the devouring Great Dao. After all, if someone who possessed the devouring Great Dao lost control of the devouring Great Dao, or if they cultivated to a certain extent and could no longer improve, they might lose control and devour any universe to increase their cultivation and strengthen the devouring Great Dao. Therefore, people who cultivated the devouring Great Dao were truly enemies of the entire world. However, as long as they didn't expose their devouring Great Dao before they matured, they would be able to grow without limit and would be invincible. At the thought of this, Huang Jinchuan's eyes sparkled with greed. He licked his lips. This was an opportunity, a huge opportunity for him, the golden origin. Compared to the devouring Dao, the branches of the ancient golden tree and the ancient inheritance couldn't even be mentioned in the same breath. As long as he could obtain the inheritance of the devouring Dao, he would be able to use the devouring Dao to increase his strength without limit. By then, he would be able to grow into a truly invincible overlord. The endless void and the 10 overlords of the universe would all be nothing but nourishment for him to improve his cultivation. He glanced at Mu He and Mu Lian. Then, he looked at Yang Hongwu and the other three. He had already made up his mind. Today, everyone here would die, including his two trusted aides, Mu He and Mu Lian. He had to seize the devouring Great Dao, and he definitely couldn't expose it. In fact, he was aware of Mu He and Mu Lian's loyalty. As their master, he had already left secret techniques on the two of them that could control their life and death. The two of them would never betray him. Even so, Huang Jinyuan didn't want the two of them to live. This was because the devouring Great Dao was too important. Even though he knew that the two of them would never betray him, he couldn't take the risk of the devouring Great Dao being exposed. This was because once the devouring Great Dao was exposed, it would definitely be a huge threat to him. In the face of those terrifying great beings, those Great Dao Knights, and even universe overlords, he wouldn't have any strength left to resist. Therefore, no matter what, everyone here had to die today. they definitely couldn't live. Of course, to him, the most important thing now was to capture this aboriginal who possessed the devouring great Tao. He couldn't let him escape. As such, Mu He and Mu Lian were actually the best cannon fodder. Although this aboriginal's cultivation was only at the Dominator realm, since he was able to gain the recognition of the supreme devouring great Tao and become its master, how could it be so simple? It was very normal for such a cultivator to be able to challenge those of a higher realm. If a cultivator who possessed the devouring great Tao was so easily killed, that would be really strange. Mu He, Mu Lian, hurry up and take down that aboriginal. Remember, I want him alive. Huang Jinyuan shouted loudly. Upon hearing their young master's command, Mu He and Mu Lian did not dare to act rashly. Although the two of them did not know how frightening the devouring great Tao was, they knew very well that the aborigine before them was not easy to deal with. Their most powerful attacks from earlier had been easily neutralized by the aborigine before them. This aborigine was most definitely in possession of an extremely powerful treasure. Perhaps that enormous furnace was that supreme treasure. Chapter 2183. When Mu Lian and Mu He saw the giant furnace, they were very envious and wanted to get it. After all, it was a powerful supreme treasure of the creation realm. They did not have such a powerful treasure. Although they wanted it, they knew that such a treasure would never belong to them. Even if they could get one, it would not be enough for them to share. Moreover, their young master, Huang Jinyuan, was there. How could Huang Jinyuan give such a supreme treasure of creation to them? This was simply impossible. Of course, if they could help their young master, Huang Jinyuan, obtain this supreme treasure of creation, they would be greatly rewarded. For the two of them, it would be great if they could enter the ancient spirit sacred pond to cultivate. The ancient spirit sacred pond was a sacred place for cultivation in the ancient spirit Tao sect. Only the elders could enter the ancient spirit Tao sect to cultivate. Of course, there was also the young lord of the ancient spirit Tao sect and the young lord candidates. Only the true monstrous geniuses were qualified to enter. Even their young master, Huang Jinyuan, had only cultivated in the ancient spirit sacred pond twice. However, each time he cultivated in the ancient spirit sacred pond, he could make a breakthrough in his cultivation. This was very rare. It was especially difficult for a Tao Lord to make a breakthrough. However, there were almost no bottlenecks in the ancient spirit sacred pond. This was the most attractive part of the ancient spirit sacred pond. However, the most attractive part wasn't the breakthrough in cultivation. It was said that the ancient spirit sacred pond contained the inheritance of the ancient golden tree. If they could obtain the inheritance of the ancient golden tree, it would be amazing. The ancient golden tree was the patriarch of the ancient spirit Tao sect. It was said that he was an unparalleled master at the overlord level of the universe. How precious and powerful was his Tao art inheritance. If they could obtain the inheritance of the patriarch in the ancient spirit sacred pond, they would be able to get rid of their current status. They would no longer be Huang Jinyuan's followers. They could become candidates for the young master of the ancient spirit Tao sect. They could even surpass Huang Jinyuan's status. Because of this, the greatest reward in the ancient spirit Tao sect wasn't a supreme treasure, but a place to cultivate in the ancient spirit sacred pond. However, for the two of them, this was an opportunity as well as a huge crisis. The furnace was filled with a terrifying devouring power. Such a power made them feel their souls tremble. This was enough to prove that this furnace could endanger their lives. This was the most terrifying thing, the most terrifying thing. If he didn't get any credit and instead lost his life, then it wouldn't be worth it. However, it was utterly impossible for Mu He and Mu Lian to refuse at this moment. Their young master, Huang Jinyuan, had already given the order for them to attack and kill the man in front of them. It was rare for their young master to say something like this. It was obvious how important this treasure was to Huang Jinyuan. In his heart, the lives of the two of them could not be compared to such a supreme treasure of creation. As a result, the two of them felt somewhat indignant, but there was nothing they could do. Their lives were not in their control. No matter how helpless they were, they couldn't change this fact. Reality was too cruel. They didn't have the leeway to refuse. Unless they died. If they resisted, they would die. Now, they could only fight. Moreover, Huang Jinyuan might not be willing to let the two of them die. After all, the two of them could be of great help to Huang Jinyuan. In fact, the two of them had always been unfriendly. However, they did it on purpose. If they didn't do it on purpose, their joint attack technique was too powerful. The strength that they could unleash was terrifying. Their potential was enormous. If they exposed it too much, they would be feared. Because of this, the two of them did not dare to show their true strength and potential. Although their joint attack technique was powerful and their talent was astonishing, they couldn't be compared to a true heaven's pride like Huang Jinyuan. If they exposed it, they would be feared and ostracized by others. The two of them were smart people. They knew what to do. However, this time, the two of them could no longer hold back their strength. If they continued to hold back their strength, only death would await them. However, at this time, Yang Hanwu would not give the two of them a chance. He could see that although the two of them were controlled by Huang Jinyuan, they actually had other thoughts. They seemed to want to hold back their strength. However, Yang Hanwu saw this point clearly and exploded in an instant. A terrifying flame burst out from the devouring furnace. This flame condensed into the red lotus of karmic fire, instantly enveloping Mu He and Mu Lian. The two of them realized this and reacted very quickly. However, Yang Hanwu did not give them a chance. Even though the two of them reacted quickly, their bodies were still contaminated with the power of the karmic fire. Although it was only a little bit of the karmic fire, it was enough to ignite the karmic fire on their bodies. Yang Hongwu's red lotus karmic fire was no longer the red lotus karmic fire of the past. The current red lotus karmic fire was vastly different from before. After all, Yang Hongwu's strength had risen to an unbelievable level. More importantly, when Yang Hanwu devoured the space origin and space great path law in this space, he refined a trace of the power of the curse. The power of the curse was integrated by Yang Hanwu. Now, how terrifying was the power of the curse attached to the karmic fire? The power of the curse was not the power of an ordinary person. It was the power of the curse of an unparalleled expert who was infinitely close to becoming an overlord of the universe. The power of the curse, combined with the power of the karmic fire, infected Mu He and Mu Lian. In just a few breaths, it had already invaded their souls. Yang Hanwu had previously endured many powerful curses. Now that he could extract a trace of the power of the curse, his use of the power of the curse was definitely not inferior to those peak experts who cultivated the power of the curse. Damn it, this is the power of the karmic fire and the power of the curse. After being infected by the power of the curse, Mu He and Mu Lian immediately shouted, "Young master, help, help!" The two of them immediately retreated to Huang Jinyuan's side. The two of them had not revealed their trump cards yet, but it was meaningless. Even if they revealed their trump cards, they would not be able to get rid of the karmic fire and the power of the karmic fire. They could only hope that Huang Jinyuan would help them get rid of the terrifying power of the curse and the power of the karmic fire. Chapter 2184. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan was still in a state of shock. He only regained his senses when he heard Mu He and Mu Lian's cries for help. The scene that had just taken place was too shocking. The terrifying power of the curse that contained the power of a supreme great path venerate was too strong. Not only that, but there was also the power of hellfire. Hellfire was extremely rare in the endless void and the various great universes. It could be said that hellfire existed in every great universe, but hellfire wasn't something that could be possessed by just anyone. Generally speaking, hellfire had its own consciousness, and even universe overlords might not be able to control it. That was the power of the Great Path. Furthermore, hellfire was different in different universes. It was also divided into different levels. However, the hellfire that this aboriginal had unleashed was obviously completely under his control. Furthermore, its power was extremely terrifying. the hellfire was actually combined with the curse. This was even more unbelievable. Even a great path venerate might not be able to do it. However, a mere sovereign realm aboriginal had managed to do it. This was inconceivable, and it also made people feel fear and dread. Huang Jinyuan was also very glad. If he had not let Mu He and Mu Lien go up, he would have been the one in such a state. He might not have been able to get rid of the hellfire and the power of the curse by himself. Huang Jinyuan waved his hand and a surge of golden dermic power entered Mu Lien and Mu He's bodies. However, as soon as the golden dermic power entered their bodies, the terrifying power of the karmic fire and the power of the curse coiled around them like poisonous snakes. Huang Jinyuan jumped in fright and hurriedly cut off his dermic power. He didn't dare to allow these terrifying curses to wrap around him. As for Mu He and Mu Lien, they were only his servants after all. If they died, then so be it. It would only cause him to have one less person to order around. It would not be a great loss to him. However, if he was infected by the terrifying power of the curse, he would be in big trouble. At least, from what he had seen just now, he did not have the confidence to get rid of this wisp of curse power. It was only a wisp of curse power. If there was more, it would be even worse. Young master, save us. Mu He and Mu Lien retreated when they saw Huang Jinyuan. They knew that they were in big trouble. The two of them could not get rid of these two powers by themselves. They could only rely on Huang Jinyuan's power. However, Huang Jinyuan did not seem to be willing to pay a huge price for their sake. The two of them had risked their lives for Huang Jinyuan. They did not know how many things they had done for Huang Jinyuan. They had even committed a lot of sins. However, they had never imagined that Huang Jinyuan would be unwilling to save their lives under such circumstances. Although the karmic fire and the power of the curse were overbearing, Huang Jinyuan might have a way to get rid of it. After all, Huang Jinyuan had the blessing of the ancient spirit Dao Sect's patriarch. Even if he couldn't completely get rid of the power of the curse, suppressing it wouldn't be too much of a problem. However, Huang Jinyuan was not willing to do so. He did not want to waste this power, nor was he willing to take the risk. This caused Mu He and Mu Lien to feel bitter in their hearts. They looked at Huang Jinyuan with eyes filled with resentment. Mu He, Mu Lien. The power of the curse is too domineering. I have no way to get rid of it. Huang Jinyuan said to Mu He and Mu Lien. Hold on. Wait until I catch that aboriginal. I'll get him to get rid of the power of the curse for you. After saying that, Huang Jinyuan strode towards Yan Hongwu. Although he was wary of Yan Hongwu's terrifying power of the karmic fire and curse, Huang Jinyuan was very careful. He knew where his advantage was. He was the young master of the ancient spirit Dao sect. He had a high status. Moreover, the cultivation technique he practiced was very powerful. He had already reached the Dao sovereign realm. Although the aboriginal in front of him was very talented and had many protective treasures, his cultivation was too weak. He was only at the sovereign realm. There was a huge gap between them. Using the treasures on him would consume a lot of spiritual energy. Obviously, a sovereign realm cultivator would not be able to do that. Therefore, Huang Jinyuan only needed to stall for time and exhaust Yan Hongwu's power. Yan Hongwu's lips curled into a smile as he watched Huang Jinyuan's scheme. Yan Hongwu knew that Huang Jinyuan did not dare to fight him head-on. He was wary of his karmic fire, especially the power of the curse. However, in reality, he had only extracted a trace of the power of the curse. If he wanted to use the power of the curse again, it would be impossible for him to do so. He did not have that much time to extract the power of the curse. He had miscalculated. For Yan Hongwu, this was an excellent opportunity. Moreover, for Yan Hongwu, this was not his true trump card. His true trump card was this formation. It was a terrifying devouring formation. It used the common people's great world and his devouring furnace as the eye of the formation. The purpose was to devour all the power in this space into his common people's great world and increase the power of the common people's great world. This was a huge gamble by Yan Hongwu. If he failed, the common people's great world and the great seal of the common people's great world would fall by a level. However, if he succeeded, the great seal of the common people's great world and the common people's great world would be greatly improved. In this way, Yang Hongwu's power would also increase. Although his cultivation realm would not increase, his combat power would not increase by just a little bit. After all, the common people's great world was Yang Hongwu's original inner world. Once it was improved, the strength of the martial artists in the world would also increase greatly. That was equivalent to Yang Hongwu's own power increasing. It should be known that as the master of a world, he could borrow the power of his own world to fight. The stronger the world, the more power the master of the world could borrow. In the past, when Yang Hongwu mobilized the power of the common people's great world, he could only display a power comparable to that of a Tao Lord. That was because the power of the common people's great world was still too weak. His own spiritual power was also not strong enough. If the common people's great world was strong enough, then he would be able to erupt with even greater combat power. He would not be so passive when facing experts. If Huang Jinyuan were to fight him to the death from the beginning, with his tyrannical cultivation and powerful strength, he would not be able to gain any advantage at all. He might even be completely suppressed by Huang Jinyuan. After all, Huang Jinyuan also had an inner world in his body, and there was a spiritual root of fate in his inner world. Chapter 2185. It was because of Huang Jinyuan's fear that Yang Hongwu had an opportunity to take advantage of. Facing Huang Jinyuan, Yang Hongwu curled his lips into a smile and said in an arrogant tone, "You have something that I want, which can help me break through the shackles. If you can return the space attribute treasure of fate in your body to me, I will return it to you. If you can give me the Tao grade spiritual root, I can spare your life." Hearing Yang Hongwu's words, Huang Jinyuan's expression changed drastically. The space was familiar with the supreme treasure of fortune, so it wasn't strange for others to know about it. However, it was strange for an aboriginal to know about it. In addition, the sapling of the ancient golden tree in his inner world was also destroyed by him. How could Huang Jinyuan not be shocked when he knew about it? One had to know that no one knew about this matter. Not even his own master knew about it. It could be said that this was his greatest secret. However, this aboriginal in front of him, who was only a weak ruler, knew about it. How could he not be shocked? If only his space attribute ultimate creation treasure had been leaked, he would have suspected that someone had leaked his whereabouts and betrayed him. However, the fact that the sapling of the ancient golden tree was known to others was a different matter altogether. It was impossible that someone had leaked it. It was because of this aboriginal in front of him. He must have something that could detect his inner world. He had never heard of any treasure that could detect the treasures in other people's inner worlds. Unless it was a great being at the level of a universe overlord, the other party would have to pay a price to do so. The kid in front of him was only at the ruler level. It was impossible for him to do so. As for treasures that could detect other people's inner worlds, there were too few of them. He did not doubt that there was such a treasure, but he was sure that he had never seen it before. Therefore, the possibility of this was too small. Since this possibility was very small, it meant that there was another possibility. There was a terrifying great being guarding this kid, guarding this aboriginal. If that was the case, then he was really in danger. No wonder this kid was not afraid when he saw him, even though he was only at the ruler level. Even after his identity was exposed, he did not panic at all. This kid's backer was really incredible. At this point, he was already regretting. He regretted provoking this guy. However, at this point, it was too late to regret. He had already provoked this guy. What he was thinking now was that if there was really a universe overlord behind this young man, then what he hoped the most was that the overlord behind this young man was not in this part of the universe. There were indeed universe overlords in this universe, but they weren't the best. Besides, he had to deal with the invasions from other universes. In that case, it was impossible for this overlord to come here with his true body. In that case, he still had a chance. However, it would not be easy for him to obtain the items on this kid's body and seize his devouring path. Brat, you sure talk big. A mere Dominator Realm cultivator dares to have designs on me? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Although Huang Jinyuan's thoughts and ideas had changed countless times, only a moment had passed. It was just a moment. At this moment, he had already made a decision. Whether or not this kid had a universe overlord behind him, he had to give it a try. After all, once he succeeded, he would gain too much. The devouring path was one of the oldest, most terrifying, and most powerful great paths. Even if he had to take some risks, it would be enough. As long as he obtained the devouring Tao, he would be able to escape into the void. At that time, it would not be difficult for the overlord of this universe to find him. After all, the space attribute artifact that he was carrying was a space attribute artifact. It was not that easy to transform into a true treasure. If it was not for his insufficient comprehension of the great path of space, he would not have had any worries at all. At this moment, he looked at Yang Hanwu, his eyes full of greed. His murderous intent began to boil. Seeing this, Yang Hanwu narrowed his eyes. Yang Hanwu was very sensitive to murderous intent. He did not expect this guy, who was very wary of him just a moment ago, to suddenly change his mind. He actually wanted to kill him directly. Good Lord, could it be that he had seen through his scheme? Yang Hanwu did not think so. However, the time he had bought was enough. At this moment, the power of curse and hellfire on Mu He and Mu Lian completely erupted. The two of them let out shrill screams. In the next moment, Zi Xintong, Jin Qiushuang, and Lu Yu attacked at the same time. Their targets were none other than Mu He and Mu Lian. Under the joint attack of the three women, Mu He and Mu Lian had no room to resist. If the two of them were not injured, it would not be easy for the three women to deal with them. However, after the two of them were schemed against by Yang Hanwu, they were hit by hellfire and the power of curse. This was much easier. At this moment, Huang Jinyuan also moved. His target was not Mu He and Mu Lian. He did not plan to save them. Instead, he rushed towards Yang Hanwu. At that moment, he had already appeared in front of Yang Hanwu. It was his space attribute treasure that had erupted with the power of space. Yang Hanwu reacted just as quickly. Sensing the fluctuation of space attribute, Yang Hanwu also used the void travel technique to avoid Huang Jinyuan. Space Tao? Huang Jinyuan, who saw this scene, was even more shocked. He was already very shocked when he sensed Yang Hanwu's devouring Tao. Now, he simply could not believe what he was seeing. This aboriginal did not only possess the devouring Tao, but also the space Tao. It was very rare for a person to comprehend two great Taos, although it was not unheard of. However, to comprehend two such powerful great Taos was incredible. It was simply unheard of. Moreover, this aboriginal's cultivation was only at the ruler realm. It was simply impossible. Yet, he had encountered it. He was aware of the danger. However, danger and opportunity coexisted. The stronger the aboriginal in front of him was, the more terrifying his talent was. For him, the greater the opportunity and benefit he would obtain. After all, his cultivation was only at the ruler realm. The gap between the ruler realm and the Tao Master realm was a huge gap, a gap that could not be crossed. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.